next. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
But there we are. Julia Hartley-Brewer coming up, of course, in the next 3 hours. You will hear all manner of delightful things. We'll be back tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Great one here from Chris. I'll finish with this. Great interview with Andrea Williams. She's a lady that stands for biblical common sense and truth. Andrea would make a great Archbishop of Canterbury to replace the woke Justin Welby. Well, I mean, she's probably too religious for that job, to be honest. You know, would anybody religious be the Archbishop of Canterbury? I'll see you tomorrow. Julia Hartley-Brewer coming next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And a very, very good morning to you. Happy Monday morning. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's coming up 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. And I'm with you all the way until 1, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, whether you're watching on YouTube or on your connected device. It is great to have your company. Also, very fabulous to have the company of Claire Pearsall, former Conservative Government Advisor. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Lovely to see you. You've got this lovely,
Yes.
I got a lovely wintry December, blue-skied, cold Monday morning after Storm Dara. Something of a relief for large parts of the country.
Yes.
I mean, good God, what on earth was going on there? I mean, literally, you know, trees being swept across. I mean, we've seen some deaths. We've got people who are still without power in their homes. So people are still dealing with that. So we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the show. But obviously, an awful lot of what's going on in the news right now is all about what's going on in Syria. But don't think this is, again, something that's happening in a faraway country that most of us have never been to. It doesn't really matter. Oh, it does. Do you remember when we had the Arab Spring? Yeah, it didn't really matter then, did it? Well, when 7 million Syrians fled Syria because of the crackdown by President Assad, that had a massive impact. That was a game changer for European politics. You remember Angela Merkel said, oh, come on in, no problem. And we had streams and streams and streams of millions of Syrian refugees. Now, many of them stayed in Turkey. Many of them made it to our shores as well. Although we officially only taking, I think, was it 5,000 or something? 20,000 in total, but 5,000 a year, wasn't it? 5,000 a year. But actually ended up being, let's face it, probably an awful lot more than that who've arrived by boat since. So when you think doesn't really matter, think again. So given the latest from Syria, rebel forces taking control of the capital, Damascus, in a lightning offensive. Absolutely extraordinary how quickly they were able to do that in this sort of moment of chaos for Hezbollah, Iran and, of course, Russia as well, focusing on Ukraine. Toppled Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. He fled to Moscow because Russia and Iran weren't going to try and save his brutal regime as they've done many times in the past. But we've seen scenes of jubilation on the streets of Syria. We've seen prisoners being released, many prisoners in torture cells deep underground. They're still trying to rescue those people. Women, children being released, brutally, brutally treated by the Assad regime. But what happens next? Because basically the people who have taken over are Islamist rebels. They're part of what is now currently a proscribed terrorist organisation, for goodness sake. So I want to talk about that and I want to hear your thoughts on that. So do you welcome or fear the uprising, given we are looking at the risk of ISIS fighters, thousands of them currently in prison camps in northern Syria, possibly being freed? Few ISIS brides? Shamima Begum, anyone? Where do you think she is? Where do you think she's going to go? Do you think those prison camps are going to stay as they are? And I say, what about the refugees of, perfectly normal, ordinary citizens who say, oh, great, let's go back to Syria. Yeah, it's looking great now. And when it all goes to pot, as, let's face it, inevitably it will, it's not going to be a Lib Dem conservative regime. It's not going to be a coalition, guys. It's not going to work out well. What happens after that? I want to hear your thoughts. Do you welcome or do you fear what is going on? Do you think it's none of our business? Well, call in and I'll explain to you why it always is our business. These places in the modern world now are much closer than we would think. I'd love to hear from you on that. Also on this HTS, this Islamist rebel group, whether or not they should be an unprescribed terrorist organisation so we can talk to them, because currently the government's not allowed to as a terrorist organisation. Hear all your thoughts. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. But don't worry, we are also going to be talking about more of what's going on at home, in particular the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper facing a revolt by police chiefs who've warned that thousands of police jobs will have to be cut due to lack of funds after the police got an above inflation pay rise. It's almost like you need joined-up thinking in government, eh? We're also going to be talking more about Storm Dara and households across England facing bin collections. You know how I feel about this. Bin collections only every 3 weeks under Labour. They quietly abandoned plans that were in the footing to require fortnightly collections by law from all councils. This has already happened under the Welsh Labour government, by the way, where routinely people's rubbish, their black bin bags, aren't collected more than once every 3 weeks. Well, when we just live among the foxes and the rats, as a lot of us already do in our built-up areas, I'm sure that'll work out very well. Anyway, that's what we're going to talk about, plus many, many, many stories besides, including NIMBYism and we'll get to a little bit of a Jay-Z and accusations against him as well. Claire Pearsall, as I say, is joining me today. There's a lot going on, home and abroad. Let's start with abroad, though, Syria. A lot of people asking how the hell did these rebels win so quickly? Who are they? Who's going to seize power? What's going to happen next? These are big issues. Do you think this is stuff that British people should worry about, be concerned about, welcome? What do you think?
Should be worried about, I think, is the first thing. There are a lot of people that will only have heard of Syria in passing. They don't entirely know where it is. They don't know the groups of people involved. However,
we've got lives. We've got supermarket shops and jobs to do. We've got things to do.
But it is vitally important, given the situation in the Middle East at the moment. It's not the most stable area. To have yet another state going into rebel control doesn't help anybody. The sort of security across the nation is at risk. It really is. And we don't know, from this group that's taken over, HTS, we don't know what their intentions are. And I think that is really concerning. This is so quick that we don't know quite.
This has come out of nowhere.
It.
It's almost like a lot of our sort of security services and things like that. Well, it's like what happened with South Korea. No one had a clue what. Now that's still going on. Why the hell this guy isn't being impeached for deposing martial law? Who knows? But it is fascinating when people think like, well, why does this matter to me? Well, one of the reasons why Assad is currently with his family in Moscow seeking asylum there. And by the way, his wife, is British-born. Yeah, we don't want your love. Don't come here. You ain't welcome. You chose your side when you decided to share a marital bed with a brutal torturer and murderer. So, bye-bye, love. You're not one of us. But that's only been able to happen because these rebel forces, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, as you say, HTS, they were able to take advantage of this power vacuum because Iran's sort of forces have been utterly destroyed in terms of in Hezbollah in Lebanon, so that's by Israel. So Iran support Hamas taking on Israel. Hezbollah get in from Lebanon, and it's all very much in that region. Israel pretty much destroys Hezbollah forces. They're the ones, it was Hezbollah militia who were helping Assad out in parts of Syria. Yeah. Russia losing, 3,000 men a day in quite many places in Ukraine, fighting, basically fighting to the death there. Those losses there mean that, of course, Russia doesn't have the forces and the military, to just send over to help Assad. Massive implications of that, though, for military in Moscow, of course, because everyone will say, oh, why on earth? Why on earth has Putin been helping Assad over the years? Because he's got a Mediterranean port for his navy. Yeah. And so he'll no longer have that. Possibly. It depends. We understand the rebels have said they're not going to touch the air base or the naval base there. We shall see what happens. I mean, it is a very complicated business, and this is where you realise these axes of evil. Okay, this is the key thing. When we say we need to take on the Putins, the Iranians, the North Koreans also helping the Ukrainian war, the Chinese, there is an axis of evil, and they will work with or against, depending on what suits their mood, Islamist terrorists at any time. And that's the thing. But we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, look, they could set up a government, there'd be democracy, things would go well. We were hopeful of that, weren't we, in Libya? 2011,
Afghanistan.
And pretty much everywhere. Yeah. Egypt, none of them have worked out. I think Tunisia, the most vaguely functioning Arab Spring country. Yeah. I'm not hopeful. No. I'm not hopeful. In which case, all the people who are currently apparently on the border wanting to go back into Syria, they may be coming back out again and heading further west if it all goes as badly as every other country in the Arab Spring.
Well, that's it. And it's not just one group involved. Remember, this is a civil war that's been going on for at least the last 14 years. Yeah. And there are several groups involved. So it's not quite as clear-cut as only having one rebel group. You've got a bunch of Turkish-backed, the Syrian National Army, which is the military wing, which is Turkish-backed, which is north of Idlib on the Turkish border. Yeah. And then you've also got on the Jordanian side the Syrian Free Army, which is the American-backed forces. And there are other groups in the middle as well. Yeah. So it's not really that straightforward. But one of the interesting parts was the arrogance of Bashar al-Assad by thinking none of this will ever happen, so I don't need to pay my forces very much. And he was paying them sort of $30 a month to be a soldier, and then wondering why his forces have now fallen apart because Russia isn't there to back them up anymore.
Absolutely. Can I just say, as always, utterly fascinated by the BBC's analysis of these things. John Simpson. I've just discovered John Simpson's blocked me. He's a journalist who's blocking another journalist. Wow. Never insulted him, never abused him, never been rude, just pointing out some of the madness of what he said. He tweeted yesterday, Bashar al-Assad has done many evil things, but he's weak rather than wicked. His family members, Iran, and especially Russia, told him what to do, and he feebly did it. In person, I found him meek and anxious to please, the reverse of the traditional dictator. I pointed out that he was really nice to his mum and also made a great Victoria Sponge. When he wasn't brutally torturing, murdering, imprisoning millions of people in his country. I mean, this man... he's just a victim. No, I'm sorry, he had the option, as someone who spent most of his life in the West, married to a woman born in Britain, he trained as an eye doctor, for God's sake. He could have responded to the peaceful uprising in 2011 with, let's deliver some kind of democracy, let's do it stably. But no, he decided to imprison people. There are people right now still in prisons who've been there since then and beforehand, who are underground prison, believe like 7 layers down.
Yes, yeah.
The Red Prison, just outside Damascus. I mean, the BBC now apologising for sodding brutal dictators. And then when someone calls it out and points out how absurd that is, blocking another journalist. I mean, grow up, love.
But they need to see it for what it is. You've got 7 floors of underground prison, including children being held.
We've seen that picture of the toddler coming out.
It's awful. I mean, absolutely hideous. There was a story...
Well, presumably, when you have female prisoners and you rape them, presumably some of them get pregnant.
But also there was a 13-year-old boy who was kneecapped because they believed he was a rebel. He was walking home from school one day. Yeah. That was his great crime.
Yeah, but again, how much better the next lot going to be? Because, again, Islamist fighters... What about the ISIS fighters coming to Britain? Because if they're free from the camps, they're going to be freeing people from the camps, OK? Yeah. They're their mates. What is the record on people who are of extreme Islamist beliefs, the ones who want the caliphate, the ones who genuinely think that anyone who is Jewish or a Christian or a non-believer is an infidel who deserves to die? Hi, that's pretty much most of the people in this country. Oh, by the way, even Western Muslims. Yeah, you're for the chop too, according to these people. I mean, I'm sorry, how many of these are going to turn up on our shores, given that we basically have an open border policy?
Well, that's the real worry, because nobody's going to know where they are, nobody's going to know who they are, they're going to be set free, and how many borders are they going to cross? They're going to go into Turkey and come across...
Yeah, and what do you reckon on Shamima Begum? Hands up who wants Shamima back? ISIS bride? She's not... No one knows where she is right now.
You're doing a good job of selling her.
I'm just saying, I'm getting... Genuinely, if you think, oh, it's something happening over there, I don't have to worry about it, I've got Christmas presents to buy, I've got Monday morning at work, I don't have time for this, trust me, this is going to impact us. Unless it all goes swimmingly well and they set up a lovely coalition government and they have wonderful democracy, it's all just fine. What do you think the chances of that are? Come on. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Tell me I'm wrong. I'm used to it. I've got a husband and a kid. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. It's 0344 499 1000. We'll get some of your messages on text and on Twitter as well. Let's also get back to what's going on here. Yvette Cooper's facing a role. 10 police chiefs have written to her about funding plans, basically saying, you've not given us enough money. They've been given a load more money. Everyone's got more money, but not enough money because they fear they're going to have to be job losses or services cuts. Let's face it, they can't cut the services any more than they already have. But their problem is they've been given over a 4% pay rise, which is over the sort of 2-point-something% they were expecting to have to pay out. So they haven't got the budget for the overinflation pay rise that police officers got. OK, police officers are not well paid. They are not living the life of Riley. In real terms, they will still have had a pay cut over the last few years or 10 years. We accept that. However, no one in joined-up thinking decided to make sure there was enough money to pay them all, as well as keep things going. Ta-da!
I mean, who'd have thought it? This government and yet another accounting error. I mean, they're full of it.
Blame this on the Tories as well.
Yeah, but we didn't give the inflation-busting pay rises that this lot are giving out. So we talk
about inflation-busting 4% when inflation has been at 10%.
But if you look at the general pot of money in the United Kingdom, how much of it has gone to the public sector? Quite a lot, especially to train drivers, which is always my big bugbear.
I've still got that. Yeah, the train drivers thing is still really,
it's still
nothing against train drivers.
No.
I just... don't know why you're paid more than surgeons.
I'd like a service to go with the train drivers.
Yes, call me old-fashioned. Well, look, added to this, we've got Rachel Reeves. She's off to address EU finance ministers, first time since Brexit. I don't know why you're at an EU meeting, love, because you're not part of the EU. Sorry, did you not get that memo? Did you not get that memo, Rachel? No, we left the EU. I know you're desperate to get back. I know you don't respect, along with the Prime Minister, you don't actually respect democracy, but we made that decision. Oh, no, apparently closer UK and EU ties would boost growth. They think we're going to boost growth by basically allying ourselves and dragging ourselves down with the French and German economies, which are on their knees. Collapsed political system, collapsed economic system. But, yeah, that's what will boost growth. Are these people insane?
Well, yes, and people like you and I were pointing out that a Labour government would always want closer ties with the EU. We were told we were scaremongering, we were doommongers, and it wasn't anything like that, and they respected Brexit. They clearly don't. They are so bitter about the 2016 referendum. They want those closer ties, and they're working really hard to get it. Absolutely pointless, isn't going to grow the country.
Absolutely. I'm going to talk about NIMBYism later on as well, about Angela Rayner. I actually rather agree with her. Let's put people wanting homes above bats and newts protection, which is what basically happens right now. But just finally, bin collections. Last Friday, sneaked out very cunningly, or Friday a week ago actually, it's been discovered, that there was a plan to require, it was some of the Tories again, one of the many things the Tories said they do and they can get round to until late because they're useless, but the Labour government has quietly shelved these plans to require councils, it doesn't matter what you spend your money on, but you're required to do a fortnightly, at least fortnightly bin collection of the black bins, not the recycling, the actual main rubbish. That's been dumped now. It looks like it's going to be every 3 weeks. Well, I mean, that's already what's happened in most of Wales, under most councils in Wales. Ours are only collected every 2 weeks. Oh, my God, the scrabble to make sure everything is taken away. So I live in a communal house. There are loads of flats. It's just an absolute nightmare. In the summer, the smell, we are surrounded by... I had a fox on the pavement this morning walking to the train. Literally, this fox, I mean, a metre away from me, looking at me. I'm like, at least pretend to be scared before you go and ransack another very, very overflowing bin. Yes. I mean, like, they don't even care. I mean, eventually, why don't we just give, let foxes just take over everything, in our major cities? But this is the sort of stuff, this is meat and potato stuff. I tell you, I will cast my vote next time round purely on the issue of bin collections.
As somebody that spent 8 years as a local councillor, the things that people want you to do, make sure their bins are collected, make sure potholes are fixed, and parking issues. Those were the issues.
I think you're fine. You should include painting all the zebra crossings in rainbow colours and being more inclusive. Is at the top of everyone's list, Claire.
Yeah, it wasn't at the top of my list, that's for sure.
Didn't
I made
get
sure
that memo. Anyway,
weekly collections.
Anyway, I mean, is it that much? Do you know what really beeps me off? Is we are the ones who pay full council tax, right? Okay. And so ours only collect every 2 weeks if the men bother. Hi, Viola, if they bother to turn up that week. The local council estate, theirs are collected twice a week because there's so much they can't. Yeah. Those massive big bits. Yeah, they're collected twice a week.
You pay for that.
Yeah, I know. Well, mine are in. Yeah, I'm just saying. But they don't pay full council tax. I'm just saying. So anyway. Letting that go. Let's go back to Syria. If you want to get in touch about bin collection, I bet you can have full switchboard on bin collections. But you can call in on any of the topics we're talking about. I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. Should we be worrying more about bin collections or Syria? There's the question for you. I want to hear your thoughts on Syria. You might think, oh, great, let's welcome this uprising. Or do you fear it? What about the ISIS fighters coming back? Do you want Shamima Begum back? Do you think it doesn't matter? Is this all part of the axis of evil collapsing? Is this good news? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on all of that. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Sainsbury's has been criticised for rebranding gingerbread men gingerbread-shaped people. Have they gone too far?
Of course they've gone too far. It's ridiculous. They've got these festive hats. So they're supposed to be Father Christmas, but they're in rainbow colours. So they're sort of LGBTQ festive hats. It's like, just give us Christmas hats, gingerbread men. It's okay.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearsall still here as well, former Conservative Government Advisor. It's interesting. Two calls I want to get to in this section. One is on Syria. We're talking, big politics stuff. The other is on bins. I'm telling you, I've been saying I messaged the guys this morning and just went, I want to do the whole show on bins, bin collections. As soon as I saw that, I will lose my frigging mind if my bin collections go down to every 3 weeks. I will not go. If you really want the British people to stage an opera, forget Islamist rebels in Syria, folks. No, honestly, the good folk of Britain on the streets with our pitchforks. I mean, seriously, we will not cope with that. That'll be the end of this government. I'm serious, that'll be the end of everything. There will be a full-on revolution, and I will be at the front of that revolution. Anyway, on that note, give us a call, 0344 499 1000. That is the number to call to talk about anything you want to talk about. But let's go, first of all, to Jim, who's in Winchester, wants to talk about Syria. Hello, Jim. Good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Julia. Your fears are correct. The ISIS Islamic people have taken control. So when they were last in Syria, they were burning Yazidi women.
Yeah, in cages, weren't they? Yeah. But this group, IHT, Inheritance, like HTS, they're apparently they are Islamists, but they've basically, gone back on quite a few of the things they've stated before. But, I always trust the word of an Islamist terrorist.
No, they're lying. It's a bit like Northern Ireland, where there's all these little organisations, all flags of convenience. Yeah. They're ISIS. The guy who's running Syria right now was second in command in ISIS.
This is Abu Mohammed al-Jawalani.
Yeah, he burned the Yazidi women. He did the head chopping. So already there's lots of videos coming out of these people beheading people. Yeah. So we shouldn't back these people with money. Yeah. This is what's happened. We have backed them. We have sent them money, and that's enabled them to do this.
Well, there are lots of different rebel groups, though, because I know, the US and Britain have been backing some of the Kurdish-backed groups. They're sort of non-sectarian, and so there is an understandable thing where your enemy's enemy is your friend. But are we in sort of Libya territory in the sense that, well, Gaddafi was awful, but he genuinely was a horrific murderess. We know he used to just routinely gather girls to rape. I mean, the man was just a hideous, awful human being. I'm very, very glad I'd have personally beheaded him myself. Absolutely awful human being. But after him, après moi le déluge, it's got a lot worse for people in Libya.
It will be in Syria. It really will. And Starmer has come out and said he welcomes this. Well, he's going to regret those words.
It was interesting because Angela Rayner doing the morning round on Sunday yesterday, and obviously great depth of knowledge, Angela Rayner, about the Syrian situation. She said, well, Assad's not exactly been nice to his people or something. Brilliant. Yeah, really good analysis there. What about, in particular, the camps full of ISIS fighters, the jihadi brides, the Shamima Begums, the refugees, if it does all, as we predict, go as badly as it will go? What are your fears there?
Well, I think all the people in London and across the UK who are celebrating this should pack their, I don't want to use a naughty word, but it begins with S, and I don't know.
Suitcases. Pack their suitcases, that's the word you were looking for.
Well, yes. No, they should bugger off now.
What Brits who are supplied to this, or do you mean the Syrians who've come here as refugees?
So across Europe, with all these people celebrating the overthrow of Assad, so
head back there.
Pack their stuff now and get out of Britain.
I have to say, I was absolutely stunned to see that people were queuing up basically at the border to try and get back in. I'm thinking, if it was me, I'd give it a few months to see what's happening first.
Yeah, who's queuing up at the border, though? Is it all the fellow head choppers?
That's a fair point. That is a fair point. And again, these things have a habit of not turning out as well as people think they do. Jim, really interesting call. Thank you very much indeed. Do you agree or disagree with Jim? Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Let's go to John, who is in Glasgow. John, you want to talk about my big bet noir, the bins?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I have a 91-year-old relative who for years got what called a backdoor collection, where the bin men would come in and take one black bag away. 3 years ago, they put in multicoloured bins for recycling and said that they would come and empty the bins. So in 3 years, they have not emptied the bins once.
What?
Not once. Apart from our green bin, which has been emptied 4 times by the bin lorry. We dispose of it. We dispose of our rubbish.
You just take it. You just deal with it yourself because it's easier.
Well, we've had the council. We made official complaints. We had inspectors come out and lie to us, and then it's still the same thing. The last piece of advice was 18 months ago was write to your local councillor, they might be able to get something done.
Brilliant.
We did that, and we haven't heard a word. So
yeah, it is unbelievably painful. But the thing is, bin collections, I mean, it's kind of pretty much the number one thing we need from our local council. Street lighting, yeah, that's good, yeah, you know. But you pay your council tax, that goes what? The fire service, the bins and things. But bins is the thing we all need all the time. And there was a reason why they brought in weekly bin collections. It was to prevent mess and rubbish and disease and rats and foxes. There was a reason for it. Why do they think that those reasons have all gone away?
They haven't. It's just purely financial.
Yeah. But cut the other stuff. Cut the rainbow painting. Cut the new hubs, all the new signage. But all that. I mean, it's all that stuff costs money. But we just want the basics.
All that stuff's not fashionable.
Yeah.
You know, the bins are not fashionable whatsoever.
Oh, no, I've got different coloured bins. My bins are diverse. That is fashionable.
Yeah, I've got 5. She's got 5 bins. 91-year-old, severely disabled, and they don't care. They just don't care.
That tells you something. And, of course, that's been under SNP government, as in Holyrood. But what's the local council's make-up? Is it SNP or Labour?
It's SNP at the moment.
And what do you make of, I mean, you're in Glasgow, so Wales, apparently, the vast majority of councils in Wales have now gone down to 3 weekly collections of bins, and the Labour control, they've been allowed to do it. The Tory government here in England was supposed to have, they were pushing through very belatedly this move to require councils to do them fortnightly. That's fallen by the wayside. On the day of the assisted dying debate, basically, this government quietly got rid of that plan. I mean, so across England, some very, very big cities, very built-up areas are going to see bin collections every 3 weeks. How do you think that's going to work out?
Well, we've had it every 3 weeks for a few years now for the general rubbish.
Yeah.
No, it's just a disaster. As I say, she's had her bin collected 4 times. Yeah. That bin 4 times in 3 years.
It could be worse. It could be worse. Do you know what I'd be doing with my rubbish in that scenario? I'd be taking that rubbish and I'd be taking it to the chief executive of the local council's office and saying, well, if you've not got a problem with having it, here you go. That's what I would be doing. But there we are. John, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate your call. 10:33 is the time. Let's go to a break. Then we're going to be talking more about Syria with Andrew Fox, who's a defence expert. Later in the show, we're going to talk to Mesa Gifford, who fought with rebels in Syria, about what he thinks is going to happen as well. Someone who's been on the ground or with Kurdish fighters. We'll talk about all of that up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with Claire Purcell, former Conservative Government Advisor, and of course me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Delighted to be joined right now by Andrew Fox. He's a defence expert and research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society to talk all things Syria. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I mean, events in Syria have moved extraordinarily fast in the last couple of weeks. I think many people were very surprised to wake up over the weekend, discover that the long-standing leader, Bashar al-Assad, had actually fled. We later found out he's in Moscow seeking asylum there, and that we've got this formally, we're told formally, Islamist rebel group, HTS, who are now pretty much in charge, along with many other rebel groups. A lot of people in the West are sort of welcoming Assad's fall and cautiously warning about what might happen. You've been following the events closely. Do you welcome Bashar Assad's fall, or do you think that actually what could happen in Syria next could be even worse than what's happened in recent years?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, trying to stay on top of this stuff is like juggling jelly, and, you know, it's my job to do that. And so for a layperson to try and keep abreast of this is a real challenge. In terms of Assad, I think we can objectively say that he is a complete monster, and his removal is kind of objectively a good thing. Subjectively, however, what comes next is a really big challenge, and this could go in so many different directions. There's so many variables here. You have military groupings, you have religious groupings, you have external players like Turkey, like Russia, like the United States, like Iran, and of course Israel are fully involved here as well. So where we go forward from here with particularly HTS is going to be really interesting. They've made a lot of moderate noises, given that they come from an extremely radical background. And the challenge is going to be whether they actually mean it or whether they're just going to go full jihadi once they've consolidated their position. And
that's the thing. Be careful what you wish for. And we saw what happened in many of the other countries that had the Arab Spring in 2011. People like me were wonderfully optimistic, but it did not work out well for most of those countries. We've seen what's happened with Libya and elsewhere after the fall of Gaddafi. But this thing, HTS, this Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they're a prescribed terrorist group. Lots of talk this morning from the government. Pat McFadden, the Cabinet Office Minister, who's been out and about doing the media round, saying, you know, they're looking at possibly changing that designation. And you think, well, why does that matter? But the governments aren't allowed to talk to terrorist groups because they're terrorist groups. So there may be a need to talk to them if they're the ones in power. But when a leader like this is Abu Mohammed al-Jawlani, when someone like him, they push this message, we renounce our close links with Al-Qaeda, we won't do this. Given their history, given the large parts of Syria they have been in charge of, where we've seen the beheadings, the executions of women for adultery and things like that. By the way, a woman committing adultery means that even if she's been raped, she's technically committed adultery. I mean, we are talking about a very cruel regime. And, of course, the concerns about ISIS returning. How far can we trust whoever does take charge?
Well, Jawlani's background is about as bad as it gets. He was radicalised by the Second Intifada. Jawlani's not his real name; it's his nom de guerre, and that is a deliberate reference to the Golan Heights that Israel currently hold. So, you know, he's clearly got a background in extremely radical Islam. He was an Al-Qaeda fighter in Iraq. He was sent by ISIS after he was Al-Qaeda to Syria to fight there. HTS themselves were the Al-Nusra Front, which were some of the worst atrocities in the Syrian war.
But now they're basically the Liberal Democrats of the Middle East, we're told.
Yeah, and that's completely disingenuous. And we do have evidence that they've administrated relatively fairly in northwest Syria. They have committed atrocities against civilians, but not on ISIS level of scale. And, you know, clearly we're never going to get down to zero with these people. So they've shown improvement, which is all we can hope for.
Yeah. But we should certainly, it's especially a case of be careful what you wish for at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, Al-Jawlani's got a an opportunity here to sort of consolidate his power base, and so he's making all the right noises. But we saw with the Taliban in Afghanistan, they made all the right noises as well when they took over, and quickly went downhill for everyone. So,
and now women aren't allowed to speak outside of their homes.
Exactly that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, I mean, what about ISIS as well? Because there's a big concern about ISIS. I mean, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, you know, these guys, I mean, a lot of people say that what's the difference? But huge number of ISIS fighters are held in camps in northern Syria. We've also got ISIS brides, you know, the likes of the Shamima Begums. What's likely to happen to them?
Well, ISIS have had a very bad 24 hours. They had American B-52s in the air last night, hitting, I think it was 70-plus targets, ISIS-related. So the West is very alive to this potential threat. I've certainly also seen warnings from people I know who visited the prison camps in the north, and their estimate is that those things are powder kegs waiting to go off. So when I spoke a moment ago about the number of variables out there, this is one of the really big ones. Yeah. The fact that straight away, as soon as Assad fell, the West took action against ISIS, known ISIS locations, I think that's a very clear indicator that there's absolutely no appetite to give them even a sliver of a chance of reproducing.
Yeah, very interesting. And were you surprised at all that Assad didn't get the help that he's previously had from Iran and from Russia to maintain his brutal regime? And obviously he's now fled to Moscow. It's not the safest place for him to go, although, you know, I suppose there are plenty of dodgy Middle Eastern countries like the Qatars and everywhere they're quite happy to have brutal killers turn up on their shores and book a nice apartment there and live there as millionaires, aren't they? But were you surprised he didn't get that help?
Yes and no. I think the scale of the collapse was the surprising thing. That he collapsed at all isn't hugely surprising, but how fast it happened was a real shock. But if we stop and take stock, it makes a lot of sense. The two key backers he had were Hezbollah and Russia, and both those organisations are having a challenging time with other conflicts. Hezbollah have been turned from a very effective army into essentially a regional militia by Israel. They've been absolutely beyond decimated in the last 3 or 4 months. And their fighters legged it almost immediately back over the border as soon as HDS, as soon as their advance was consolidated. And Russia are clearly having a really rough time in Ukraine. They're having to bring in troops from Yemen, from North Korea. They simply don't have the resources to come in hard on Assad's side at this point. So, yeah, the speed was surprising, but the fact that not so much.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm waiting to see when the Islamist rebels in Syria decide to thank Israel for their help. Because, of course, if it wasn't for the Hamas attack on Israel, we would not have seen the Hezbollah attack on Israel, the retaliation, the destruction of Hezbollah and Iranian foreign forces, effectively. I mean, the jigsaw puzzle of this is quite extraordinary, isn't it? I wonder, I mean, in terms of to people who, you know, I often talk about this, like whether it's Ukraine or what's going on in the Middle East, and it's something we see all over social media as well, and people just say, I don't know what it's got to do with me. We shouldn't get involved. Like after Iraq and Afghanistan, I remember people back in, 12-odd years, 13 years ago saying, we don't want any involvement in Syria. You know, people die. Well, of course, when we didn't get involved, we saw what happened, and 500,000 people were brutally murdered by Assad. Where people are still being imprisoned, executed, tortured, people being rescued from those prisons. I'm sure some of those are people who we wouldn't want out on the streets. Many of them will be people who simply wanted democracy and been imprisoned by the Assad regime. But we're in this situation, yet again, where people are saying, it's not our problem. But, of course, what happened in Syria very much became our problem in 2015 when we saw that mass wave of millions, 7 million refugees fled Syria. How concerned should we be about how this impacts us in the West? If we're going to talk purely, selfishly, every right to do in this country, in terms of ISIS fighters being freed, the likes of the Shamima Begums, ISIS brides like that, coming back to this country, able to travel freely. Law-abiding citizens, but scared of the new regime, Syrian refugees coming to Europe, possibly to the UK. What should our concerns be there?
Well, clearly we've seen instability in countries that have led to huge migrant flows. If you look at the demographics of people coming across the Channel, the majority now are Afghan as a direct result of our withdrawal from Kabul. So I think for the UK, there's two things here. First of all, we need to make sure that these countries don't descend into situations where people feel the need to flee. And then, of course, we need to sort out the problem in the channel of illegal crossings to make sure that at least if we're going to bring people to the UK as refugees, we know who they are and we know that they're not going to be a security threat.
Yeah. I still remember when David Cameron said they'd just take 4,000 a year, but from the camps fully verified and the most deserving people, 20,000 in total. It's an absolute outcry in the media and on the left. And the British people went, still think that's too many. I mean, British people have got sense. Can I just ask you just finally, I mentioned this bit earlier to Claire Pearsall, but John Simpson, BBC's John Simpson, a man, many people have known and trusted for many years, he tweeted, for some bizarre reason yesterday, Bashar al-Assad has done many evil things, but he's weak rather than wicked. His family members, Iran and especially Russia, told him what to do and he feebly did it. In person, I found him meek and anxious to please, the reverse of the traditional dictator. What do you make of that?
I think it's a good example of how you can easily get things wrong on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it.
This is the analysis from a top figure at the BBC.
It is. And that constrained nature of that particular platform can certainly throw up these challenges. The bottom line here is that Assad had agency. He was a monster. The things that are coming out of Damascus in those prisons, the gassing of children and ethnic groups. I mean, this guy is a top-tier tyrant monster of the worst kind. And I don't think it's wise or clever to try and make excuses or justify or try and explain his appalling regime in any way.
He didn't look like a tyrant, but he was one. Just because he made a nice cup of tea when you interviewed him doesn't make him not a tyrant. Andrew Fox, thank you for that. Really appreciate that. Quick reaction from Claire Pearsall.
Yeah, I think what Andrew just said is right. We need to be incredibly concerned at what comes next. This is not a nice, fluffy, Lib Dem style takeover.
Not that we want a Lib Dem takeover in this country either, by the way.
But I think it's probably
yes.
preferable to a bunch of terrorists. Yeah. And I think most people would see
These
that.
people do not change their spots.
They don't.
Yes, I love the optimism of the Western governments at the moment. We shall see. I wonder if their defence forces, security forces feel the same way. Great to have Andrew Fox's analysis. Up next, we're going to talk about the woes that people have been facing here in the UK with the just horrific Storm Dara and the huge amount of damage done. We'll talk about that with Claire Nasir up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
You could die. And we're not messing around here. They will compete. We can't tell at the moment whether COVID's going to come out on top, whether flu's going to come out on top, or possibly even RSV. I was looking on the tube yesterday, and the hygiene level of people on the tube and indeed on the shops is not good enough.
No. In terms of public conveniences, there's never soap, there's never enough sort of hand washing facilities, and I think we need to improve that as a public health measure.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:52 is the time. Well, if you are one of the many, many people trying to recover from Storm Dara and the aftermath of the flooding, the damage to roads, railways, homes, we've even seen some deaths, absolutely horrific tragedies of that horrific storm over the weekend that simply would not stop. 200,000 homes are still without power this morning due to those gale force winds. Let's talk about all of this with Claire Nasir. She's a meteorologist and weather presenter and joins us. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, look, I had the minimal impact of the storm, which is I had a big party on Saturday night and I lost a load of gas to trains being cancelled. Trains being cancelled is the least of your worries when you're dealing with a storm with those sort of gale force winds, though, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Storm Dara barreled into the UK from the west through Friday night. Gusts in excess of 90 miles an hour. That warrants a red warning, which is what the Met Office issued. And there was multiple hazards associated with it. The interesting thing about this storm was the ferocity, but also the length and the breadth of it. So no one was immune to the strong winds, heavy rain, snow over the Highlands, apart from the far northwest of Scotland.
Yeah, who normally get the worst of these things.
Yes.
That's it. It was just across the country. It was, all north, south, east, west. And it just went on and on and on for, it felt like days on end.
Yes, it did. It became slow moving. The centre of the low, where the worst storms were to the south and the west, tracked from Northern Ireland to Northern England and only slowly moved towards the North Sea. And that's the reason why the worst winds were in the south. But there was a broad yellow warning for wind, and there was multiple problems on the roads, the rails, the air. It was a horrible and nasty storm. Yeah. And as you said, impacted millions of people.
Yeah, indeed. I think it was 2 or 3 million people lost power for periods of time. I mean, all credit to the emergency workers, working round the clock to try and get, power lines back up. And again, these are exactly the times when you definitely need power to keep warm. But we're going to still see that the fallout of that for a really long time. We've had a spate of floods in recent weeks and months as well. An awful lot of people's homes facing a lot of damage. And, of course, a lot of people facing, devastated lives. And we've seen people who've lost loved ones too.
Yes, I mean, just a few weeks ago, we had Storm Bert, and there was a lot of flooding from Gwent to Northamptonshire, where some villages were pretty much underwater. You don't recover very quickly from that type of flooding with property damage. No. It can be 6 months to a year. So this is misery for a lot of people as we go into the festive season and for Christmas Day, with roof damage, property damage, and just trying to get from A to B. Yeah. It was a horrible event.
Well, actually, that again, it's like people trying to loads of trains cancelled and loads of roads impassable, and we've seen at least 2 people dying in the road with trees falling on them. When that red warning goes out and says it's a risk to life, they really do mean it. But then some people have to travel. They have no choice. They need to travel. In terms of what we've got in the week ahead, are things going to improve? What are we looking at for the Christmas period?
Well, I think we can breathe a little bit easier this week. Good news for the recovery period, because we absolutely do need it. It's going to be mostly dry and quiet, but the land is really saturated. We do not need any more rain in particular, and things could turn a bit more unsettled as we head into Christmas week.
We're not going to be having a white Christmas, are we?
Possibly, yeah, possibly.
Really? I just think it's going to be one of those sort of wet and miserable ones. We're in the studio. It's the 17th floor, absolutely beautiful building overlooking the River Thames here at Talk TV Towers. And we had beautiful blue skies an hour ago when we started the show. Dark grey, miserable again. I mean, it's just incessant, this. The British winter is upon us.
It's dark, isn't it? And people get really down. That's why we need Christmas on the 25th of December, just to lighten those dark moments.
It's why we need Christmas lights, chocolate and alcohol. That's why we do it. It's why we do it, Claire. Claire, thank you very much. Always good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Claire Leslie is a meteorologist there. Another Claire Pearsall, former Conservative government advisor. When you were in the Tory government, why didn't you sort out the weather? The awful thing is, I always talk about this. We've been flooded before. We've got a half-off flats basement. I just don't ever, please, for the love of God, though, I don't care how good it is, don't buy a basement flat, guys. And we think we've got it watertight now. Who knows? Who knows till the next time? Thank God for good insurance. An awful lot of people who've been facing damage won't have insurance. I mean, people should, but a lot of people go, you know what, times are hard financially, and of course, every time something happens, your insurance premiums go up.
They do, and the risk level of your property then goes up. And we saw this before with floods back in sort of 2014, where a lot of properties were then deemed uninsurable. And it was a 1 in 100-year flooding that happened. So I think the insurance industry needed to sort itself out. But I also think that we need to start making sure that councils get rid of all of the stuff that's in the drains so that all of this surface water can
actually
flow
go
away.
Cutting the trees back and doing all that stuff. I mean, there was a time, come on, when we would go, warning storms, and we're still all laughing about the, I've had a call from a woman who says it's worried about a storm, and then it's just going to be a bit of wind, and it was a proper sort of mini hurricane. And people say, storm damage, and here's my wheelie bin, it's fallen over. But I mean, we were having stuff coming down into the garden. I mean, big branches and things. Yeah, we've had trees down in the local area, but that's because of the saturated ground. I think we got off quite lightly in Kent. We were lucky. An awful lot of people did not, though. It has been very, very, very rough indeed. Well, it comes back to the bin collections issue, doesn't it? Like local councils do the basic stuff, the dredging, all of that stuff.
Flush the drains.
So everybody is so you're prepared for the worst case disaster. And we nearly always find when there's been problems, there hasn't been the general maintenance that is required to make these things work. And it's always that cost cutting. They need to cut corners. So and then it costs jetting of gullies and all of that kind of stuff they get out the window. We do all the exciting topics on this show. Who knew? I did not think when I woke up this morning I'd be talking with Claire about the jetting of gullies. I'm not going to lie to you, that did not come up on my bingo list, but there we are. But we are. I want to hear from you. Do you get in touch? 0344 499 1000. Get in touch about the jetting of gullies. Bin collection, honestly, bin collection's going 3 weekly in England. Already the case in Wales and large parts of the country, but mostly I want to hear about Syria. Not our problem. Who cares? Yeah, it has a funny habit of becoming our problem. I'd love to hear from you. What are your fears? What are your hopes for what's happening in Syria and how it impacts us? Do you fancy a few jihadi brides and a few ISIS terrorists back in the country when they're freed from those camps? We'll talk about all of that. Give us a call and have your say. This is, of course, Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Delighted to be joined by Claire Pearsall, former Conservative Government Advisor, and also joined by you, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. It's great to have you on board. Lots more today. We're going to be talking about more from Syria after rebel forces took control of the Syrian capital Damascus in a lightning offensive which seemed to take everyone by surprise. The toppled Syrian President Bashar al-Assad fled to Moscow after Russia and Iran failed to save his brutal regime. It's believed he's going to be getting asylum there. There's been jubilation on the streets of Syria. We've also seen a huge number of prisoners being freed, including women and children from some of the most brutal Assad-run prisons. But there are fears growing about what happens next, because these are fundamentally jihadis, whatever they say today. And we are also talking about what could happen with those ISIS camps of ISIS fighters that have been basically controlled by Assad in the north of the country for many years. But what about when those people all get freed? Where will they come? Because their mission is to, well, kill us all in the West. So maybe we should be paying rather more attention. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Do get in touch. Basically tell us, do you welcome or fear this uprising? Because it's worked out so well for so many other countries like Libya, hasn't it, really, which is still an absolute basket case country that is busy just funneling hordes and hordes and hordes of people from Africa and the Middle East into the Mediterranean, into Europe and onto the Channel and to this country. I want to hear from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK and send your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Tweets, of course, are free, as is leaving a message on our YouTube page as well. I'd love to hear your responses, but particularly want to hear from you on the phones. Also going to be talking about the biggest issue ever in my life. How good is your life, though? This is the thing that bothers you the most. Bin collections. Bin collections went from weekly to fortnightly, and if you live in most of Wales, they're now every 3 weeks. Well, they're run by a Labour government in Wales. We've had a call from earlier from a caller in Glasgow, where actually, you know, they're every 3 weeks there as well. But Labour quietly a week or so ago abandoned plans to require fortnightly collections, something the Tories said they were going to do, and as per usual didn't get around to doing. But it could mean that your black bin collections only every 3 weeks. How will you cope with that? Because what else are we wanting councils to do for us? If you don't need social care, that's pretty much all we want you to do. That's all we want. Collect our sodding rubbish and just keep quiet about everything else. I don't need you to pledge allegiance to, you know, to Stonewall or to, you know, the Democrats in America. I just need you to collect my sodding bins. That's all I'm looking for. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000. Also going to be talking about police chiefs. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper facing something of a revolt by police chief. They've joined together in a letter written to her, warning that thousands of police jobs could have to go because they haven't got enough money to pay all the police they've got after they got an above-inflation pay rise. I mean, there's no joined-up thinking, guys. Plus, we're going to talk about NIMBYs, the Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary Angela Rayner. She's declared that NIMBYs Wiltshire's no longer have the upper hand, as she unveiled plans to end their chokehold on house building, where she says bats and newts' needs are put above those of people wanting a new home. I've got to be honest with you, I think she's right. But we always oppose NIMBYs, don't we? As long as they're not in our backyard. Anyway, we'll talk about all of that coming up. And Claire Pearsall, as I say, joining me for all of that chat as well. Let's go back to Syria. And we'll get calls in this next half hour as well. Very interesting talking to Andrew Fox earlier, who's an expert in this field. And we're going to be talking to Mesa Gifford, we've spoken to before, about he's fought in both Ukraine and in Syria about the people who are involved in this organisation that is now the lead rebel group. Again, one of many different, various groups. And this is the Syrian rebel leader, Abu Mohammed al-Jawlani of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group. That's the HTS group we've been hearing so much about. They're the ones who basically been ruling parts of Syria They swept through. I mean, it was extraordinary. Aleppo, then Homs, and then straight into Damascus. Assad flees like the pathetic weasel, coward, brutal dictator he is, with his wife, British-born wife. Dad, you didn't want to come here. Don't want you, love. No, sorry, you've got blood on your hands as well. Bye-bye. If you want to go and live in Moscow with your other blood-soaked dictator friend, have a nice life. But he's out of power. But the question is, who is going to be in power in Syria? A lot of people are saying, oh, well, this could work out very well. We'll get the UN. I mean, even, the likes of this government, the UN will try and support democracy. Yeah, like they did in Libya, like they did in Afghanistan, like they did everywhere else. I think other than Tunisia, none of these uprisings have ever gone well.
No, they don't. And how we would like a country to run is largely irrelevant. This has got to be down to the Syrian people. This is a matter.
Maybe they don't want democracy.
Absolutely. The Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister there, Mohammed Ghazi Jalali, who was under the Assad regime, is hanging on by saying, don't worry, folks, it's going to be OK. I'd like some immediate elections. Now, if you are the rebel forces that have just taken the country by storm, do you really want to go and send everybody to the ballot boxes to see if it's a nice, fair election?
And I wonder what they'll vote
you turfed out?
There's massive sectarian differences there. I mean, we've had a Sunni minority, as often a Sunni minority that are been in charge and brutally repressed the Shia majority and Christians and everybody else.
And the Kurdish population, and the Yazidis as well. There are so many different religions there. There are so many people who are looked down on as second-class citizens.
Yeah, but this is one of the reasons why I don't want sectarian voting in this country. I don't want a situation where if you're Muslim or if you're Jewish or if you're Sikh or whatever, any religion whatsoever, that you're voting for a particular party for that. That is so unhealthy. I mean,
it is.
How's it worked out in Northern Ireland, everyone? I mean, that's the thing.
It doesn't work.
But this is the thing. There seems to be so much hope. Let's talk about looking at the prescribed terrorist organisation status of this HTS. Now, you think, what on earth is that about? But basically, Western government, you can't talk, you can't have any dealings with or official links with any of these organisations if they are prescribed terrorist organisations. So there's a point for that. And if they become if they do actually become the de facto government, then it's probably better that we're talking with them.
Yes, however, do we remember what happened in Afghanistan where the Taliban said, yes, we know that we were pretty bad, we're not very bad now, we're going to have a lovely country, it's going to be great. It isn't, especially if you're female. I suspect
never works out for us, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I suspect that similar things will happen in Syria. I think that the West needs to stop and just watch.
Yeah.
And I worry that we're going to start having that knee-jerk reaction where we must go in and do something. Yeah. And it's really, really unhelpful.
I just don't think it's going to help, no. But I'm not sure sitting aside helps either. But the one thing that I find really irritating, especially, the people who, a lot of people who commentate on this idea that they said, well, these fundamental human rights and all of these things. There's no such thing. None of this stuff exists without the nation state. It doesn't even exist when you have international courts. And by the way, International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice. Where are the court orders for arrest for Bashar al-Assad for his war crimes in Syria? He killed 500,000 of his own people. He gassed his own people. He gassed the Kurds. He gassed women and children. He's used chemical weapons, for God's sake. I mean, he's brutally tortured. Brutally tortured in prison hundreds of thousands of his own people. I'm sorry. Where is that ICJ arrest warrant? Where is that? Because I don't understand. Oh no, sorry. What was I thinking? Bashar al-Assad's not Jewish. He's not Jewish. That's why. Because it's okay. No. You only go after Israelis because they're Jewish, right? It's just extraordinary. The West is like gone. Yeah. Where have all the marches been? Where have all the, I remember back in 2015 there was a big sort of outcry about, remember that little boy Aryan, and he was
washed up on
the beach. Lots of evidence that actually his body was placed there and photographed there, had been placed there actually by activists trying to get more publicity. That was the photograph which prompted Angela Merkel to say, oh yes, oh, we should open our doors to every Syrian refugee, and millions of them crossed into Europe. Remember those literally hundreds of thousands of people at a time in long marches through Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe were going, yeah, keep on moving. You ain't welcome here. We're poor enough already. We've got our own problems, and coming to the West. I mean, how's that worked out for Sweden, for Denmark, for Germany, for Austria, for Britain, indeed? How's that worked out? I mean, it is extraordinary how damaging that has been to sort of community relations. I think that's the PC way of putting it these days. But this stuff has a habit. People say it's happening over there. It has a nasty habit of becoming our problem.
Yeah, it really does. And the interesting thing is a lot of Syrians who are settled here are now saying, brilliant, there's a free Syria, we'd like to go back. And it's like, OK, so you want to go back. The situation's not great at the moment. What happens when it all goes wrong? Because inevitably there will be something else that comes up, given all the groups involved in this. Are they going to want to come back to the United Kingdom? I think the government needs to come down very hard at the moment as to what their rules on this are going to be.
Do we want Shamima Begum back, ISIS bride and all her little chums?
No, and I've been quite outspoken on that. I was at the Home Office when that decision was taken to remove her citizenship. Yeah. And it was a very tricky time at the Home Office, to be perfectly blunt. But the decision was made. She doesn't have citizenship any longer.
I mean,
She's kind of made her bed.
She renounced her own citizenship.
She did.
I was always of the view that she's one of ours. She was born here. She's British. She has no other citizenship. I mean, I do accept that she renounced. When you joined ISIS, you renounced citizenship. Yeah. You joined the caliphate. Well, ta-ra then, not our problem. My view was always she was British. Yeah. We should have her back, but she should be behind bars the entire time. I don't believe she was groomed. I don't believe any of that nonsense. She knew exactly what she was doing. When she was first interviewed, she had no regrets whatsoever, and then has tried to play it since. But, I mean, fundamentally, I'd rather she wasn't anyone's problem. She was behind bars. But I know if she came back to this country, Shamima Begum would be on the streets within weeks because our criminal justice system is so abjectly hopeless. Yeah. And I think that she is a threat to us. Yeah. And therefore, if we're not going to have a sensible system that says if you go and join a terrorist group, you go to prison for life, then she has to be elsewhere and I'm afraid be someone else's problem. But she absolutely is someone else's problem. But the fact that it took, what, 5+ years or something for them to get to that? I mean, we are such a hopeless shambles. And anyway, she's probably already back here. She's probably already here. She's probably come across on a boat, thrown away her documents.
Do you think she's making her way back to London?
We haven't got a clue. This government and the last government didn't even know that 300,000 people who were here legally with visas were in the country when they did the last stats.
Yes.
What do you think the odds are? Hi, Shamima, if you're listening, love.
Do you think she's tuning in?
Try not to kill everybody with your terrorist sympathies, But I mean, we are living in a mad world. I just have no faith at all after what's happened in recent years that we are in any way able to direct what happens in the world, control our own border, preserve the safety of this country. I really am not. I'm genuinely concerned about that. Love to hear your thoughts on that happy Monday morning, Philly. But this is going to end in disaster, not just for the Syrian people, but for us as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to have your say. Let's also talk about Rachel Reeves addressing EU finance ministers wanting closer ties with the EU. I don't know what... I mean, it's not a meeting of European ministers, it's EU ministers. What the hell is our Chancellor doing? Or is it a meeting of Europe finance ministers the only place where people actually like her anymore?
Well, it's a meeting of minds, isn't it? She's gone over there to have a lovely little chat to see how best she can grow the economy in the United Kingdom, conveniently forgetting that in 2016 we voted to leave the European Union.
Did we? They didn't. Oh, she didn't get that memo. The bloody Labour front bench didn't get that memo till they lost the 2019 election.
I think I've still got some of the literature. I can post it to her. She'd like that.
But here's the thing. How on earth are we going to boost growth in this country by allying ourselves with the EU, where the two biggest driving force economies, France and Germany, are both economic basket cases now?
They are. The pressures in EU finance are enormous. And Germany was always looked at as the prosperous nation, the most stable nation, and that's collapsing rapidly. France, not very far behind. And then you've got places like Greece, which have already been bailed out, and you start to look at their finances, they're not too great either. do we want to align ourselves with that? And that was the whole point of the Brexit debate, is that we wanted to be a sovereign country and stand alone. So why go back there? And I do think that this is rejoining the EU by the back door. I've always said that that's what wanted to do.
Let's rejoin the failing EU. Brilliant. I mean, there's things that end up being de facto. We just what's it called? Dynamic alignment.
Yes.
Where you basically just follow. We're not in the EU. We just follow all the rules. We don't get any say over the rules. No, the whole point is we can make our own rules
and don't get the money.
And when they work for us, we'll end up paying the money.
Yes.
Oh no, there's never any money for weekly bin collections. There's definitely going to be money if you're going to give it to some millionaire Eurocrats in Brussels.
It'd be nice if we could give some of that money to the farmers, but no, we're not going to give that to them.
I don't know.
It's been
quite cold this weekend. It was pretty chilly this morning. I imagine some pensioners might quite like to be able to afford to put the radiators on.
Yeah, in that ideal world.
Don't worry about that. Let's talk about house building. We're going to be talking a bit more about this in the next half hour or so. But Angela Rayner, I actually agree with her. I've got to be honest with you. I actually thought she was saying something that made quite a lot of sense. She said that NIMBYs will no longer have the upper hand. She's unveiled plans to end their chokehold on house building in this country. And basically, if you stop NIMBYs having their say, not in my backyard, people, and it's banana, absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone.
Yep.
If you stop people having their say in local councils or stopping local house building plans, you don't get any house building, because there's always a local council, and people who own their homes locally are always going to try and stop local homes being built, even though they'll then go, it's terrible, my own kids can't get on the housing ladder. Oh, I wonder why.
Yes.
I think that most people's issue, and again, and she points out, we shouldn't be worrying about, bats and newts and their habitats. When people need homes, here's the thing. If we didn't import 1 million new people a year, maybe we wouldn't need so many new homes. I know, mad idea, eh? And two, crucially, I think it's about the kinds of homes that are being built.
Yeah.
And they're so ugly. Honestly, I live in a conservation area. You're not allowed to change the windows, change your front path, not allowed to do anything. Oh, but at the end of the street, some absolute modern monstrosity that doesn't match the brick. None of it remotely matches the local area. They're allowed to do what they want. They build these absolutely monstrous, horrible, ugly homes that no one wants to live in. That's why people object, and the noise for some years. But there are ways of dealing with this, but we need more homes.
We do, but we need the right homes. And unfortunately, developers come along with plans for these 4 and 5 bedroom luxury developments when the housing needs, certainly in my area, is for 2 and 3 bedroom homes.
Yeah.
That was what people were
would like to have
out
2
for.
kids.
And they'd like to have a little back garden, somewhere to park their car. Especially in the countryside.
Always a bugbear. And someone to put the bins when they're not collected for 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah, and it's things like that. It's the infrastructure, it's the Wi-Fi, it's the gas, electricity, water, all of those supplies that are never thought about until the end.
Yeah. I know.
Why?
All the basics. Again, build a load of new homes, but nowhere for them to park, no new GPs, no new schools. It is my big. I think, again, it's the lack of joined up thinking on this, but we do need at some point to build some more homes. But I do think also we do need to stop importing more people, although we're told we haven't got anyone. Nigel Farage pointed this out.
Yeah.
We haven't got anybody to build the new homes because we haven't been training people. So we've just got quite a few million people. A lot of them, young men, not working. But no, let's just import a load of new people who will also need somewhere to live to build the new homes for the people who are already here. I mean, it's a properly insane way of running a country.
It is, because a lot of those people who are sitting there on the benefits at home probably could make a really good go at plastering, at building, at electrician.
Also, not sure I want to give them the choice.
No. Well,
job.
We've had this discussion. I think absolutely need to get out there.
It's really well-paid stuff. I think
is.
if you're vaguely good with your hands, vaguely strong, you're insane not to be in this line of work. It pays really well. You'll be in non-stop work anytime you want to be. I mean,
never met a poor electrician. No, let me tell you.
Absolutely. Hi, Jason, my electrician. Anyway, Claire, thank you very much indeed. More coming up from Claire. We're going to get to your calls as well. I'll hear from you on Syria, NIMBYs, big elections, you name it. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll get to your texts and tweets and your calls up next. This is Talk.
10,000 foreign prisoners released from our jails then go on to commit other offences. When foreigners are locked up in the UK, do you know what, government? Just deport them.
Yes.
Get rid of them. They have abused our hospitality. They have no right to remain on these shores. Get them on a plane and get them out.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Coming up very soon, we're going to talk to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, former Conservative Party leader, about all the latest stories, including the possibility that Suella Braverman, former Home Secretary, could be defecting to Nigel Farage's Reform UK, along with her husband. What do you make of that? First up, though, let's take your calls, 0344 499 1000, about everything we're talking about. Syria, bins, NIMBYs, you name it, and get to some of your text messages as well. I'm asking you in particular on Syria, do you welcome or fear the uprising? Tell us why you do fear it, why you do welcome it. Ian says the same is happening as did in Iraq and Libya. Looting has already started. The central bank has been looted, so no wages this month for civilians. It's always the civilians that lose out. Darren says one would hope that those who fled Assad's regime will be returning now. And Billy says it would be nice seeing the refugees return home, given the brutal regime has been toppled. And Peter says, pray for Syrian Christians. I fear they are in grave danger. And Brenda says the Sunni majority will now rule, which makes all minorities like Christians, Kurds, Assad's elites susceptible to ideological attack, which is not unknown in the Islamic world. It's the extreme jihadis who do evil in these situations, often young and without mercy or wisdom. I think it was a Sunni minority that were in charge under Assad, so that's not quite right. But again, complicated business, these Middle Eastern sectarian battles, aren't they? Let's go to Tim, who is on the line in London. Tim, you want to talk about Syria. Do you welcome or fear what's going on now?
I actually wouldn't use either of those terms. I mean, whilst I don't mourn the toppling of Assad, I am concerned about the fallout of it. And the reason why is because actually you've obviously alluded to it already, is that what we've seen, certainly I would say in the last 20 years, in sort of Muslim North Africa and of course in the Middle East, when we sort of see these leaders topple, often at times something worse or takes its place. Yeah. I think we've seen that, of course, in Iraq. We've seen that in Libya. I mean, the toppling of Gaddafi created a migrant corridor through which many people are now being smuggled into Europe and, of course, by extension, into the UK as well. And so that's my concern. And, I think... whilst Assad was a terrible person, obviously I don't think anyone with, common sense can deny that. No. He was a secular leader, and, Christians and other sort of groups were sort of allowed to coexist under his leadership, as was the same in Iraq with Saddam. And also, I think, unfortunately, if he is political Islam has, I think it's undoubtedly been a danger to not just the West, but all over the world. And so if you have...
Largely, by the way, to Muslims. The largest group of people, political Islam, the Islamists kill and brutalise are the Muslims.
Yep, absolutely. But I think, and I said I make the distinction, of course, between sort of Muslim people and like political Islam. But, with political Islam, what we see is that the way it's exported to the world, the threat it poses is different from other forms of political movement. So that's my real concern as to...
How people are going to be treated in Syria, but also people turning up on European shores, as they undoubtedly will. Again, it's really interesting talking to Andrew Fox. I don't know if you heard him about an hour ago. The leader of this group, HTS, Abu Mohammed al-Jablani. He's a nasty piece of work. He's a jihadist.
He absolutely, and so as I said, whilst I don't mourn the loss of Assad, I am really concerned about what takes its place, because for us who live here in the UK and indeed in the West, these things often have a massive ripple effect.
Absolutely. So, in terms of what the West should do or not do, what would your preference be right now?
Well, I would hope our intelligence services and those who are sort of in the know Middle East experts would have already had their finger on the pulse and had some idea that something like this may have happened. Something like this would happen. And what I would also hope is that they would have sort of, pragmatic plans in place. I mean, the difficulties is, I think you've also mentioned, we obviously have, what's going on with Israel and Gaza and Lebanon, and of course we have the ever-present threat of Iran. So the Middle East, I think, has to be handled really delicately. And of course we have massive problems here at home as well, that we need to attend to. So I think it really does call for a lot of dexterity. I think it calls for cool heads. Thankfully, we don't have sort of, politicians who are itching for another Middle Eastern war, because we certainly can't afford that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just hope that cooler heads prevail. I hope that we have people who really sort of understand, because I think, sorry, I don't want to take too much time, but I think one of the difficulties with Iraq was that it appeared to me that we had people in place who didn't really understand the region. And I hope that now we have people who really understand how to navigate.
But also understand that we can't impose a lot of sort of Western liberal values on countries that it's just completely alien. Again, this idea there's like these sort of, universal values. It's just a load of abject nonsense. It's a creation of the West. It only exists in the West. Really great call. Thank you so much, Tim. Just one aspect of that before we go to another call in just a moment. Claire Pissell, it's really interesting, the fact that we didn't see Assad being rescued by Iran or by Russia, both rather busy with other matters. But a lot of people talking about the possibility that the Iranian regime now, without the Hezbollah fighters, there's some elite fighters, they've still got the Revolutionary Guard, but the ability of Israel to completely and utterly put a stranglehold on their ability, whether or not, there is an awful lot of people in Iran who want the mullah's gone there. I mean, whether or not we could see another spate of governments falling.
You could. There's always that ripple effect that happens where you start to... people feel emboldened by the action that has been taken and think that they could do it as well. But I think what concerns me is the Iran pockets of terror that are across the world. What's going to happen with those? Are there going to be retributions happening in other countries because of this?
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for that. Well, look, let's go take another call as well. Chris is in Hereford. And Chris, you want to talk about the important stuff in life? Bin collections. Good morning to you.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I was reading an article this morning in my local paper, and it says they're going to improve our bin collections. Currently, we have a fortnightly bin collection, black bin. And when I read it, basically what the council want to do, introduce electric bin lorries.
Oh, you mean so instead of petrol ones?
Yeah.
How's that going to improve our bin collections?
It's not, is it? Because they want to... Because I don't know, our council's part of the Greens and stuff like that.
What's your local council?
I think it's Herefordshire Local Council.
OK, yeah.
So it's probably because we got my MP is in North Herefordshire is a Green. So
basically everyone in charge has got pink and blue hair and
and basically we're paying for that because our council tax is going up next year.
Of course it is. So there's nothing wrong with the current bin lorries, but they're going to get nice green bin lorries, so that it lowers the carbon footprint of the bin collections.
Lowers the carbon emissions.
So let me clarify. I mean, they can lower the carbon footprint, obviously, by just having fewer bin collections. But as I said, that's not going to mean any more bins get collected. I would have thought also, in terms of charging them, whether they'd be able to collect bins all day would be an issue.
I live in North Herefordshire, and basically we're a very rural community.
Yeah.
And our town is spread out quite a long way, sort of thing. So I don't know how they're going to do that.
Well, they're going to be able to do half as much because they have to go back and charge, aren't they?
Yeah,
but I love that that's what they're spending money on. Are they painting a few road humps in rainbow colours as well, just to sort of cheer people up? Because they see.
I really do not know, to be honest.
It's only a matter of time, mate.
It's just a matter of time, and it's just. we have to pay for that, and our taxes, our council tax will go up again next year.
Yeah, don't worry, they'll charge you more for parking your own car and driving it soon, and we'll just have bin collections once a year when we're lucky. It's a beautiful, beautiful, fabulous country, this, isn't it, Chris? Thank you very much indeed for your call. I feel his pain, I really do. 11:34 is the time. I'm going to take a break. Going to talk to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. Also going to be talking about NIMBY stopping house building. Angela Rayner wants to take them on. We're going to talk to the campaign manager of, I love this name of this group, they're called Just Build Homes. Do exactly what it says on the tin. We'll talk about all of that up next. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:37 is the time. Let's talk to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith now, Conservative MP and former Conservative Party leader as well. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, what do you make of where we are in Syria? Rather than going through, obviously, all the options of what could happen about, but what the British government under Keir Starmer should be doing right now?
Well, it sort of throws into light what's been going on, really, with Israel and Hezbollah. The reality, he's been overthrown because Hezbollah have been basically destroyed as a serious fighting force. They are the proxies of Iran. Iran, therefore, is busy with them, unable to help. Russia, of course, involved in the Ukraine war, absolutely unable to help. And he doesn't have the capacity, or didn't have the capacity, to fight the rebels. So you can see that the shockwaves of the conflict that started in Israel with Hamas, how the ripples of that are right across the Middle East now. Who knows who this new lot are? They have a pretty bad record at the moment for Islamic extremism. They're a mixed bunch, as usual, so there may be some decent people in it. And now this opens up the door to all sorts of internal conflicts. Turkey, of course, supporting them, but then you've got various other groups that have a chunk of Syria already. So I just don't know. I don't see this being settled quickly. The government has got to very quickly settle this row that's going on in Cyprus about the sovereign bases. They've, of course, opened the door to that because, of course, the Chagos Islands deal is such an idiotic deal, which means everybody else that's got sovereign bases there will now be saying, well, give us those back, and we can't afford to do that. And the second thing is we better make some fast tracks to Trump, because he's the new president coming in, and he will consider the whole of this to have been really a problem with British stupidity at the beginning in terms of our ability to be able to work together. So we better start making some very strong alliances with him as well.
Yeah, what did you make, by the way, of Keir Starmer? He was already planning a trip in the Middle East, and the man can't keep off a plane, it would seem, at the current time, but he was already planning to go to Bahrain and Saudi. Instead of going along with many other world leaders to Paris for the... OK, I mean, do we really care that much in terms of, for us, but going to see the reopening of Notre Dame after that terrible fire? But when Donald Trump was going to be there, we've ended up with Prince William making nicey-nicey with Donald Trump rather than our own Prime Minister. Is that what we're resorting to now?
Yeah, it's rather bizarre, actually, I have to say. He should have been there because it was a real opportunity for him to get close to Trump and... Trump, whatever anybody thinks about him, is the incoming president. It's very important that they have a proper talk now that he's been elected. I'm pretty certain I know why he's gone for this little tour around the Middle East. It's because they realise that their budget has been such a disaster. They're desperate now for growth. Look at the way he's been sucking up to China unnecessarily. And now he's gone to the Middle East to suck up to all those other countries, the oil-rich countries, to get them to invest in projects in the UK, not least of which is the UAE, who've got some very dodgy issues, particularly about people that they hold prisoner and they want them to come and invest in nuclear energy. So
yeah, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I don't want various different leaders of petrostates in the Middle East to come and buy up most of London and our utilities. Thanks very much. I'm not sure that's a healthy way to run an economy.
It's not, and what's going on here is you can see the desperation in his face. So he's literally going around every country asking them for commercial favours, and that's now their priority because domestically they're in a lot of trouble. But that means, however, he wasn't at Notre Dame, and he didn't have the opportunity to speak to Trump. It's good that Trump got on very well with Prince William, but Prince William isn't the government at the end of the day, so this needs to be resolved, and they need to have a serious policy about international relations and the threats that are pouring onto us at the moment.
Absolutely, they really are, and I'm not quite sure whether they're on top of most of these things. I mean, what do you make of Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor, heading over to Brussels today to meet with other EU, we'd meet with EU finance ministers. We're not in the EU, talking about having a business-like relationship with them, saying that, we need to go for growth. How on earth are we going to boost our own country's growth, appalling growth level, by basically hitching ourselves closer to Europe, where the two major economies, both France and Germany, are in absolute freefall?
Yeah, it's a bizarre sort of position to take. We have a trade deal with the European Union. If they want to do anything at all about that, they need to make sure that the European Union behaves properly over that trade deal, tidy up those elements. Running around sucking up to various bodies in the EU isn't going to change the terms of our engagement. But there is a very big possibility in America. Donald Trump has a huge affection for the UK, and he wants to do a trade deal with the UK, no question at all. And so the reality is they should be there. And that's another reason why they should have been at Notre Dame, because that's what they should be talking about now.
And it is those,
a trade deal.
It is those sort of one-on-one moments. It is that sort of making those friendships, those alliances, those personal connections. This really matters. There's a reason why they all go to these summits. It's how they can have that quiet word and have that personal connection. And we know that's how things work with Donald Trump, don't we?
They do. You saw how he behaved with Prince William. Yeah. He always has that very close moment with various people that he quite likes. He's always been a huge supporter of the British monarchy. And so the result of all of that is that we had an opportunity to go and get beside him and talk to him. After all, United States is our biggest single country partner in trade. And ironically, we do a surplus with the United States. We don't do a surplus with the European Union. We haven't done for 40 years. So the reality is this is a real opportunity to establish new links, particularly on financial services, which is a huge market for us.
Yeah, indeed. Let's bring things closer to home, though, and talk about the stuff that really matters to local people. A load of new houses being built at the end of their street and feeling like they're not going to have a say, and their bin collections. Talking about the housing, first of all, Angela Rayner, both Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary, has been talking about how she wants to sort of put people ahead of, you know, the protecting the local wildlife, the bats and the newts and their habitats, and actually making sure that the NIMBYs don't get the final say. At the end of the day, this is something that your party wanted to do, but then failed to do because, of course, local MPs in many shires went, this is really unpopular with my voters. But we all know we need more homes, and both your party and the Labour Party insist on having millions of new people coming to the country, so we need even more homes. Is the answer taking away the final say on new house building projects from local people?
Well, I've always had a problem when you say to local people your view doesn't count, because in my constituency, for example, the council wants to just dump huge tower blocks all over the place. So nobody's opposed genuinely to building houses that are in keeping with the other houses. In other words, if it's low-rise family housing, that's what you need to build. I once approached the council about this and said, you keep on dumping these plans for 10, 15, 20-storey buildings there. Yeah. Amongst family housing. Yeah. What you want to do is make law land available for family housing, and you won't get as many objections to this. But instead of which they said, oh, well, you know, it works in Manhattan, one of them said to me. I said, what? This is outer London. It's not Manhattan. Central London, fine for those sort of tower blocks. But, you know, do it properly, yes, and then you'll find fewer local people object. And that's where the problem arises.
Yeah, but also if the homes were affordable for local people's adult children, which they rarely are. I mean, certainly around my way, the new homes, and their idea of what an affordable home isn't remotely affordable to most people who are looking to buy a home and start a family.
That's exactly right. And, of course, it's all about doing it right. Now, of course, there do need to be changes to the planning system. The planning system allows far too many constant niggling people opposed to things on very low numbers. But that can and should be done, but it takes a long time to get planning changes through. I mean, I was in a government that said we're going to really change all those planning applications, change the rules so that we can get stuff done quicker. And after about 2.5 years, we didn't produce very much at the end of it all because there were so many blocks going on within government. So it's a very tough thing to change our planning to look like something, I don't know, in France where they just bulldoze over people's objections. We don't do that here. That's a good thing, but it's also difficult.
There must be a happy medium where things need to be built and people need new homes. But we could also try not importing 1 million more people every year, couldn't we? That might help as well.
Well, a huge drive for new housing, yes, for local people, of course, but the big demand has been hugely to do with the, migration, and there's no getting around it. There's no trying to pretend that this hasn't been a problem. Yeah. If you're importing every year, you know, a city the size of, I think, Sheffield or something, then you're going to be in trouble. And it's also, the other problem is so much of what we do is concentrated in the southeast of England. You know, unlike most other countries where there is plenty of land around other cities in the Midlands and particularly in the north, we want to diversify and push out a lot of business to other areas around the UK so that there you'll get much housing already and you'll get more space to build housing.
Yeah, and it will help boost those economies. Well, I just want to ask you just about bin collections. Very quietly on the date of that this is a dying debate when all the focus was on what was going on in the Chamber, the government dropped what was, again, a far too late in the day Tory plan to require councils to empty our black bins every 2 weeks. Most places now it's 2 weeks for black bins, sometimes longer, and 1 week for every week for recycling. In Wales, under a Labour government in Wales many years, it's now down to once every 3 weeks. Many built-up areas in London, I mean, that's what we're facing too. The plan to basically require the fortnightly collections, that's been dropped. As a cost-saving measure, everyone's now expecting it's going to be every 3 weeks. People don't really want much from their local council, but one of the few things most families do want is just their bins collected, their rubbish taken away. How tenable is it for the entire country to move to every 3 weeks?
It's ridiculous. Because, of course, particularly in places like London, where you get foxes, etc., moving around, urban foxes and others ripping stuff out of the bins, the longer you leave them there, the more difficult it gets to collect it as well. And the problem is that for many households, it becomes an eyesore if you're not careful. And there's already difficulty in the number of bins that exist outside houses.
Oh, God, yeah.
You want to add another bin or two to that, it's going to literally be an eyesore for all of them too.
We're going to be
I don't
rubbish
see
bins
why-
with houses attached at this rate, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah. The 3 weeks, it was bad enough. It's bad enough 2 weeks, but 3 weeks will be, I think, really awful. And I don't think people pay their council tax, etc., so that they can see their bins lying full of rubbish. And particularly over the Christmas period, of course, where there's going to be a lot of rubbish put out there. If there's nothing collected in time, it's a disaster.
Absolutely. Oh, and just finally, I've got really, really briefly, Suella Braverman's husband, we understand, is defected to Reform UK. Possibility the actual former Home Secretary may defect to Reform UK. Are you thinking of doing the same?
No. Not at all. I don't think they'd have me. It's a bit like Groucho Marx. I could never be a member of a party that would actually have me.
Not going to happen. Ian Doug-Smith staying put. Syrian, thank you so much for joining us. 11:49 is the time. Quick word on that from Claire Pearsall.
I love the fact he's not defecting and you got a straight answer from a politician.
I think you always get a straight answer from Syrian, actually. That's why I like having him on.
He is, and he's spot on about bins. I mean, this is going to be the hill I die upon today.
Absolutely,
bin collections.
absolutely. Honestly, the bin. Let's not the bin party. I want my bins collected every day. 11:49 time. Up next, I also want people to be able to buy homes. You can only do that if we build some more homes and stop bringing so many people in. We're going to be talking to a campaign group called Just Build Homes. Up next is Angela Rayner. God, this is hard. Actually write about something. We'll talk about that next. This is Talk.
$10,000 foreign prisoners released from our jails then go on to commit other offences. When foreigners are locked up in the UK, do you know what, government? Just deport them.
Yes.
Get rid of them. They have abused our hospitality. They have no right to remain on these shores. Get them on a plane and get them out.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. One of the most surprising things that's happened this weekend is I found myself in agreement with Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, and indeed Housing Secretary. She was doing the Sunday morning media round and was talking about how she wants to, as Housing Secretary, build more homes and end the NIMBY chokehold on house building. The not in my backyard people go, oh yeah, we definitely need more homes, just not here. So where are they going to go? She says we need to put the needs of people who want a home over and above those of, newts and bats and their habitats. I think she's right. Let's talk about this with Millie Dodge. She's campaigns manager at an organisation called Just Build Homes. Millie, sounds like you do exactly what it says on the tin. You just want people to build more homes.
Yeah, that's correct. So we exist to connect supporters of house building with the planning process to do exactly what Angela Rayner was speaking about, because there has been this huge perception that housing is unpopular because there hasn't been any dialogue with people who are affected by the housing crisis. Yeah. When the truth is, most people do want to see new homes go ahead.
Yes, exactly. And I'm guessing, I mean, you're very youthful. You're one of the young people who are sitting there going, how am I ever going to be able to afford a home when house prices have gone up just sort of virtually vertically in the last 20 years, but wages aren't doing that with inflation, all the extra costs, just getting harder and harder, and mortgages are harder and harder to come by, interest rates going up as well, that actually just becomes untenable. And they just simply aren't building enough homes. Were you at least hopeful that Labour meant it when they said they were going to build 1.5 million new homes over 5 years? By the way, it's exactly the same as the pledge the Tories had. It's 250,000 homes a year. Did that make you feel hopeful?
Well, we support any initiative that's going to contribute to building more homes in the country. And a lot of the work that I do is focus on filling the gaps in the planning system before we do get to that point, because obviously it's quite difficult to overhaul a whole planning system and make those changes quickly. And I think my main concern is that the planning system is not set up to cater to the voices of people who are in need of new homes.
Yes, it listens to the people who already own a home in an area who then go, oh no, you can build it somewhere but not here because it's going to affect my view, or I'm going to hear the lorries when they're building it.
Exactly, and we need to do more to get the supportive voices involved in the debate, people like renters, younger people living at home in their 30s, and it's these voices that we amplify with Just Build Homes.
Absolutely, and it's very, very true. And what's fascinating also, often the people who are objecting to homes being built in their local area will at the same time, in the pub the next day be complaining about how, their son or daughter is working hard and is renting but can't afford to buy somewhere. They don't seem to see these two things as being linked.
Yeah, we have conversations every day with people who want to see new homes go in their area, and I've noticed a really big uptake in people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who are suddenly the pennies dropping and saying, actually, I would really like my younger children to remain living in the local area, and I don't want them to have to move far away or stay living with me, in fact.
Yes, but more importantly. But this is the thing, it's often the kind of homes. I mean, for me, again, I think an awful lot of them are absolute carbuncles. They're horribly ugly. They're not the sort of homes that most people want. And Claire Pearsall, my guest in the studio, was saying, you get it'll be a load of luxury flats, or it'll be a load of, big mansions and houses. Well, most people can't afford that. Or there'll be, high-rise blocks. Again, people want to have a little bit of garden. They want their kids to be able to play outside. They built the homes that people wanted and made them attractive. People probably wouldn't object so much.
Yeah, and I think that is a really important point as well. And we spend a lot of the time talking to local communities about the kind of home, people who are in need of housing, what they would like to go ahead, and working with the industry to deliver homes that people actually need and want, that provide the things that they want to see as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the crucial thing here as well is is one of the points that Angela Rayner made is we've got a very slow planning system. It's very complicated, very expensive. We have these accusations that building companies, they buy up land, they land bank, and then they basically improve the value of it because it's got planning permission eventually. But actually, a lot of these things are stopped by, the lesser spotted newt or some vole or something that's been discovered. So we can't build anything there because it's going to disrupt the habitat. I do agree with Angela Rayner, I'm sure you do as well, that we can't just put the needs of some a bat above the needs of families who need homes.
Definitely, and I do believe that you can do both. It's about readdressing the balance and taking away these blockers that is making it that we're not building enough homes in this country.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, high-rise blocks in the centre of London, more of them. We actually need homes. I mean, I would like there to be whole new cities. I mean, whole new sort of prettier Milton Keynes is built on the Greenbelt. Are you a Greenbelt builder? Because I'm massively a big fan of building on the Greenbelt.
I think it's just about building in the places where people want to live and the homes that people want to see. And if that's on the Greenbelt, then that's the homes that we need to deliver.
Absolutely. It's all very well people objecting, but they've already got their homes. And someone probably objected to their home being built in the first place. Millie, thank you so much. I hope you'll come on the show again. Millie Dodd is a campaigns manager at Just Build Homes. I mean, this is a very good point, Claire Bissell. You as a local councillor would realise this. You hear from the homeowners, but you don't hear from the renters. You'll never get a chance to buy in your area.
And that's the problem, is that everybody's there and settled. I mean, my village that I live in is about 55 years old. You can imagine prior to that, people were going to have been moaning about the fact that it was being built.
I don't even live there, and I put an objection in.
It's beautiful. I love it. But I think that we need to be very, very careful with what we wish for.
And also stop importing so many people. They don't need to build so many homes. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is great to have you on board. Thank you so much for joining us. Claire Pierce also here, I'm delighted to say, former Conservative government advisor, giving a tuppence worth, as I am, on all the big topics. Got lots of more top guests to come as well. We're talking about all the big stuff. Syria and bin collections. I mean, that's basically all the big stuff today. That's all it is. No, there's lots of other stories going on. We are going to be talking about the latest on Syria. More of your calls coming in on that. Do get in touch, because I'm asking you particularly whether you welcome or fear the uprising. Bashar Assad, no doubt a brutal, terrible dictator, although apparently not a bad person, according to John Simpson of the BBC. I mean, apparently it was because he was told to do it. He was told to torture and murder, 500,000 of his own people and to gas children. I mean, he wasn't. He was lovely to his mum, and he made a lovely Victoria sponge. And for mocking that absurd tweet from a senior BBC Foreign Affairs correspondent, I've been blocked on Twitter, or X, what it's called. So that just shows you, that shows you how things are at the Beeb these days. But anyway, Bashar al-Assad is in Moscow. Good riddance to him. But jubilation on the streets of Syria, about how long will that last? People going back to Syria, we're told. How long will that last? Because the people who are now in charge, it looks like, are basically Islamist rebels. That doesn't work out well in any other country. You know, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, everywhere else, has it worked out well? I mean, Libya, how's Libya doing? So I want to know your fears, your hopes for the uprising. How long before we see Syrians coming back to Europe? What about the Islamist fighters currently in prison camps in northern Syria? How many of those are going to be freed, along with some civilians who just wanted democracy? What about the ISIS bride, Shamima Begum? Fancy her coming back? We shall see what happens. I'd love to hear all your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK to 87222 and get in touch with us on X at TalkTV. Don't forget that your calls are charged at the national rate and text costs one standard network rate message. Also going to be talking up next about the health service. People who dial 999 are actually being told by ambulance service now to, if you're having a heart attack or a stroke, something that serious, not talking about, I think I've hurt my leg, can you come and help me? They're actually being asked to make their own way to hospital because the delays for an ambulance are so great now. Ambulances apparently should be seen as a luxury now, really. Plus, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is launching a mass expansion of GP services. He wants doctors to be basically fast-tracked into being GPs rather than going into hospitals to tackle the NHS workforce crisis. Also, we're going to be talking about LTNs, those low-traffic neighbourhoods. This after a cash-strapped council was ruled to have unlawfully used low-traffic neighbourhoods as a tax on motorists to balance their books by raising millions of pounds from fines. We knew that's what they were for, really. It wasn't about saving the planet. Not that it needs saving and not that that would work anyway, but we knew that's what it was about. Anyway, time is 12:05. So much to talk about. Clem Hissel, just find a quick word on Syria. Well, fine. Well, we're going to be talking to Mesa Gifford, actually, who's someone who's Britain who's gone and fought in Syria and then later went on to fight in Ukraine as well, about what is really going on there. But, I mean, in terms of specifically what the British government should do right now, if anything, what should they be doing to deal with this situation in Syria?
Listening very long and hard to the security services. I think that we need much more intelligence to come through, and I'm sure that the Prime Minister is doing that before anybody has a go at me. But I think you need to look at that. You need to listen to your Chief of Defence Staff to see what your capacity, should there be any kind of incursion of troops needed. But you also need to talk to other world leaders. So you do need to go and speak to President-elect Donald Trump. You need to be able to work together on this. You cannot just rush in. This is so new.
Do we have any say? I have a funny feeling like that we, you know, I mean, talk of this government talking about, oh, you know, we're going to work with the UN and build democracy. It's like, I don't think you'll have any. I don't think the UN has any say whatsoever.
But that's also pushing our way of life onto a nation that may not wish to have
it. I mean,
it.
how's democracy worked out in the rest of the Middle East when it does get tried? Oh, there's only one democracy in the Middle East. Where is it again?
Yeah.
Oh God, where is it?
Would that be where the International Criminal Court has put out an arrest warrant for the democratically elected leader?
Well, well, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, bombing terrorists who've attacked your own people, that would be a war crime when they hide behind civilians. Yeah. But brutally murdering, gassing, torturing 500,000 of your own people in Syria, Assad, not a problem. No, not a problem.
Apparently,
arrest warrant for Assad.
Apparently just a nice man following orders from other people.
Following orders from other people, according to John Simpson of the BBC. Genuinely, you think that honestly, guys, he literally wrote that. But anyway, we'll talk more about that. I want to get your calls coming in. 0344 499 1000 is that number to call. Right, well, let's talk to my next guest, Stephen Dorrell, right now. He's a former Conservative Health Secretary, now a Liberal Democrat there, and a former chair of the NHS Confederation as well, which could basically brings together all of the NHS trusts. Good afternoon to you, Stephen.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Just before we get on to the health stories, of which there are a number this morning, what are your thoughts? I mean, in terms of you would have been in government when we saw, you know, the Arab Spring, we saw those uprising across North Africa and the Middle East. And obviously there was so much hope then about how things would turn out, and pretty much didn't turn out well for anyone. I think Tunisia is the only country that hasn't gone to sort of rack and ruin as a result. What do you think this current government should be doing, if anything, about what's happened in Syria now?
It isn't going so well even in Tunisia. It's also worth remembering, isn't it, that back in 2011, actually Syria, the origins of the Syrian civil war were massive peaceful demonstrations in Syria itself. And so here we are 14 years later, huge disappointment across the Middle East following the Arab Spring. What should the British government do? It should sit and listen and watch very carefully. There are clearly a number of regional powers that have a big vested interest in what happens in Syria, notably Turkey, Iran. Israel, of course, has a very keen interest in what's going on in Syria. So I think the leaders of that process clearly have to be the people on the ground, not people in Europe or in the United States.
Yes, indeed. We shall see what is the fallout, but I have a horrible feeling it's not going to be something that we're going to welcome. But there we are. Stephen Doyle,
if I may, can I just say I wholeheartedly agree with that. Nobody should mourn the passing of Assad.
No.
But I can't see anyone on the horizon at the moment that I would want to endorse.
No, certainly not jihadi fighters, but there we are. We're old-fashioned like that, eh? Let's turn back to what's going on in this country. And there's two interesting stories in the last couple of days in terms of the healthcare service. One is the West Midlands Ambulance Service. It's covering Birmingham, and this is a huge ambulance service. Basically, saying last week they've been under severe pressure. They confirmed that there's actually been a change to the script. This isn't the odd ad hoc 999 caller, but they get given scripts their call handlers should use. And they are basically now advising people who dial 999 because they're having a heart attack or a stroke, they say, make your own way to hospital at peak times, because they are basically saying some of these waits are so long, patients are dying. Now, my own mother, December 2019, had a heart attack. As a former GP, realised she was having a heart attack, was on a bus already, got off the bus to get into a taxi, arrived at the hospital having the heart attack. You know, I mean, just sort of, thank God she didn't wait for an ambulance, because she probably wouldn't be here today. But it's an extraordinary thing if the people answering the phones for an ambulance are saying, we can't give you an ambulance, even when we know an ambulance would be necessary to save your life for a heart attack victim. What on earth has gone so horribly wrong?
Well, there's no defence for that. Clearly, the emergency services are there, should be there, with giving the highest priority to people with the most urgent need. Yeah. And it's very hard to think of a group of patients with a more urgent need than those suffering a heart attack or a stroke.
Yeah.
There's libraries full of clinical evidence that stresses the importance of prompt care for people in those conditions, and that underlines the need, of course, for prompt ambulance services. But if I may, I think it's part of a wider problem that we've seen on health service stories over the last week, because we've seen this story on the Westminster Midlands Ambulance Service. We've had West Streeting, who are generally favourably inclined towards, but still waiting for a policy. West Streeting yesterday saying the key thing is to build GP services. I don't disagree with that. But the problem is, if urgent care is a priority and GPs are a priority, and last week we had the Prime Minister saying that waiting lists were a priority.
Yes, they're all a priority. It's almost like keeping people alive as a priority.
Well, and on a different day, don't forget, Julia, you and I would say that none of this will work until we get social care sorted out. So there's another priority.
Yeah.
And it's an old saying, when everything is a priority, truth is nothing is a priority.
Yes, and yet, of course, as you say, you can't you can't deal with hospital care unless you've got social care sorted out, because you've got all these people who are going into hospital unnecessarily and can't leave hospital. This awful phrase, bed blockers. But you're not going to do that without dealing with social care. But that also requires better GP care and easier access to GPs. And again, if you don't deal with the GPs, then more people go to hospital. And it's this big circular thing. Does it involve, we're constantly being told, just more and more money?
Well, it does involve money. There's no point denying that. But the truth is...
But there is more money all the time.
Well, of course, the government is making virtue of the fact that there is more money. And as I said to several people over the weekend, when we've got all these priorities and everything is a priority, thank God there's no constraint on resources. That's not the world we live in.
Yeah.
We have to make choices. We have to deal with we have to have a plan that shows how these interrelated services can be made more reliable for the benefit of the people who rely on them. And if you start by dealing with ambulance services and providing resources to enable people to live lives outside hospital, what you do is relieve the load on the hospital, you improve the quality of urgent care, and you enable the hospital to do more of the waiting list, treat more people on waiting lists. But you do have to do it according to a priority. You have to decide which one you're going to do first without forgetting the others, in order to ensure that you're tackling the issue in a properly planned way.
Well, I mean, you like me, you said you got a very good opinion of Wes Streeting. I do. I think he's sharp. I think he understands it. He was the first to say, look, the NHS needs reform from the Labour side, from a senior position. That's all bodes well. But as you say, he wants to rewrite the NHS workforce plan to, he says, create a transformed health service. Well, yeah, good luck with that. I think the thing we were almost stunned by was that under the Tories many years, there wasn't a workforce plan. Why senior figures in the NHS didn't think they'd do one anyway, because that might be a good idea. I mean, there are people who run corner shops who've got more workforce planning, frankly, than the entire NHS. I mean, number one thing we need to do is get rid of the chief executive, in my view. She's clearly and utterly out of her depth. But if you get more doctors to train to be GPs, you'll have fewer training to be consultants, won't you?
Well, if the question, of course, numerically, if you have the same number of doctors, then of course that's true. It doesn't have to be true that if you're training more GPs, you train fewer consultants. There's no necessary relationship between those two. And also, the health service has always had an exchange of other health systems in the world, and in truth has benefited from that. So I don't think we should close our minds to people coming into the health service to work from overseas, and indeed going from the health service to work overseas.
You say that. I mean, I've no objection to someone coming from abroad to do a job here, but I find it extraordinary. We sit there and go, we haven't got enough nurses and doctors, isn't this terrible? When there are thousands of young people with the grades who want to go to university, and we limit the number of places for a British person who's got grade A's coming out of their body, or whatever, coming out of wherever they come out of, coming out of their ears, and they've got the grade A's, but they're not allowed to study because they're only paying $9.5 grand a year. But someone from Singapore, Nigeria, India, or China, or wherever, they can come and study medicine. Because they're paying 30, 40 grand a year. I mean, and then we say we haven't got enough doctors. Well, of course not. Well, I mean, it's insane.
I'm sitting talking to you, Julia, from the city of Worcester, where there is a medical school which until very recently was allowed, the university here was allowed to establish a medical school on presumably more than one condition, but one of the conditions was that it didn't accept any UK students. That lunacy.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, well, precisely. That was the position when they started the medical school here. No longer is the position, thank goodness, but it illustrates the kind of doublethink that goes on in official circles.
Yeah. And again, it's this idea that all these other countries have miraculously got to these incredibly clever people who can get these grades. I understand there are something like, in the early thousands of young people who would like to study medical. I've got my daughter and all her friends are all going through those university interviews and applications at the moment, and it's heartbreaking seeing kids who work so hard, who've got prediction, they've got not grade 9 GCSEs, they're being predicted A's and A stars in science and math, and being told no, you can't have a place at medical school. But we'll just bring anyone in from another country and then claim we haven't got enough people here to do the job. I mean, it's heartbreaking.
If I may, Julia, I do agree with you about the nonsense of setting up medical schools and not allowing British students access to them or limiting the access. I agree with that. But I don't think I don't think there's anything inconsistent with agreeing with what you're saying about that, and at the same time saying the health service should be open to people coming from overseas, and that we should continue to take part, as we always have throughout the history of the health service, in the international movement of people with clinical skills. I think the health service benefits from those exchanges.
Well, you say that, but I've mentioned this on air before. I remember when my husband was in hospital and we had to get advice on what to do with bandages and things afterwards, and we couldn't understand a word that the nurse was saying. I mean, literally couldn't understand a word. And we were very polite And we kept asking again, could you write it down? Could you? And there was another nurse, and they're both from different countries. I don't think they could understand each other. No, I don't. I'm sorry, I don't think that is a good thing. There is also a massive issue in India. 1/4 of people in this was a report, I think, in Reuters did this. 1/4 of people who've got a medical, who work as doctors in India don't actually have a medical degree. You can literally purchase a medical degree. You can literally send someone else to do the exams for you in India. And yet, let's just import a load of people who may or may not have a medical degree while not training our own people.
So when I chaired the Health Committee of the House of Commons, which you referred to in your introduction, thank you, is one of the things we did follow up, that people shouldn't be delivering medicine or clinical services in this country without command of English, for the very obvious reason they can't communicate, as you say, either with each other or with their patients.
Well, this was only a few years ago. We definitely couldn't understand what he had to say.
And people are not allowed to practice in this country as doctors unless they're registered by the General Medical Council. And the GMC maintains the standards of people who practice as doctors within the UK. Neither of those two principles cut across the benefit that the NHS has always derived from having people working within it that have worked in different medical systems. It's a great mistake to imagine that the strength in being closed. We should be open. We should understand how other people do things, because we might occasionally learn from.
Yeah, I'm just not entirely convinced that we're going to learn that much about how to run a medical system from third world countries. I'm sorry, I'm not. I will say, here's another thing. The GMC, 75% of doctors who get struck off have been trained abroad.
Yeah, people who are struck off clearly shouldn't be practicing, goes without saying.
But they're a tiny percentage of the actual numbers of doctors who were practicing, but they're 75% of those who get struck off. I just don't think the stats bear this out. I just think, here's another thing. We've been talking about housing as well on this show, and NIMBYs and the like. When we train up British people who are already here, or even the children of immigrants who are already here, and they're able to go to medical school or nursing, getting a nursing qualification, they're able to work here. They already live here. We're not importing new people to do a job that we've got plenty of young people who want to do in this country and who already live here. So we're not needing to build all those extra homes for those people. I mean, it's a win-win.
We've already agreed that if there are people who are qualified to get to medical school, they should have the opportunity to do it. That's not in dispute.
Yeah, but the government you worked in, and you'll know well, actually made even more limits. But again, by the way, also something that the British Medical Association endorsed.
I'm not here to defend every...
No, I know. Listen, I'll let you go. It's been a fascinating discussion. I really appreciate you joining us. Stephen Doyle, thank you very much indeed. I wonder if you guys want to have a say on this. 0344 499 1000. Should we just be bringing in more foreign doctors? If you do have a priority on, focus on getting more doctors working as GPs, does that mean you have fewer working in hospitals and you end up with the same issue? Yeah. What about having a heart attack and being told, don't bother calling 999, get someone to drive you to the hospital, get in a cab. I mean, that's what I would do, certainly. Claire Pearsall, ask people to call 0344 499 1000. That's right, 0344 499 1000. Text 87222, get in touch on X at Talk TV, make sure I've got all the right numbers out there. Do get your calls in on that. But Claire, I mean, genuinely, other relatives, elderly relatives, they've had a fall, and the carer sitting there for 2 hours waiting for the ambulance. I'm like, oh my God, I'm down the road, call me.
Yes,
I think you can't wait for an ambulance anymore. But I'm thinking you can't wait for an ambulance for a fall because they're dealing with the heart attacks. No, in the West Midlands, they're not even dealing with the heart attacks.
And that's completely wrong. I had to go to hospital a couple of years ago with a broken pelvis.
Ow!
And my
husband... That is a serious injury.
It hurt a lot. And so my husband had to come and back the car into the stables and pick me up and get me out.
It was a horse-related injury.
Obviously.
She does this, people.
She
does this.
Horse-related industry. But he had to get me to hospital, so we had to drive in the car, park in a car park, which was not near to the A&E because there was nowhere to pull in. He then had to find a wheelchair.
I've got to be honest, I'd have just gone into the ambulance bay and taken the fine.
But you couldn't even get to it because there were ambulances queuing in it, so there wasn't any space because they were stuck there. So he then had to find a wheelchair to try and transport me in. It was not easy. I was quite grumpy, so I was sort of...
I'd be quite grumpy if I'd broken my pelvis.
But the most hysterical thing was him pushing me down a hill, which I didn't entirely trust him to get me to the bottom of it in Well, I know I wasn't in one piece.
We can all laugh now.
In one piece. We can laugh now. The trauma has gone. But it's wrong. I'm lucky he could drive me. There are a lot of people that don't have that luxury.
No, exactly. It is just extraordinary. We're just not a serious first world country anymore.
Not anymore.
We're just not a serious country. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your experiences on this. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. 12:23 is the time. Up next, take more of your calls on all of the big topics we're talking about. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
The loony lefty walkie-talkie Nasal Nights World Tour goes on. Whilst he's out there, he's making business in the UK more attractive than it's ever been. We've seen business confidence in this country through the floor.
Yeah.
You can't get businesses from across the globe to invest here because he's killing them. Those NICS contributions that he's pushed up are driving businesses out of business. We've seen it. People won't invest here. Every Labour government in history leaves office with unemployment higher than when they arrive in office.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Coming up very soon, we're going to talk to Mesa Gifford, who fought in Syria with rebel forces, not the ones who've just taken over in Syria. We'll get his thoughts on what he thinks could happen next. Lots of your calls and texts also coming in on that. Let's go to David, who is in Exeter and wants to get in touch. Good afternoon to you, David.
Afternoon, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. All the better for talking to you. What do you want to say?
You were talking earlier about Rachel Reeves being at the EU at the finance ministers' meeting.
Yeah.
I'm going to submit this because last week the EU announced that they were toying around a €500 billion burst of money to do with the European Defence Fund for the EU to go and purchase defence systems and platforms.
Yep.
So because we're still in that, thanks to Boris, and not really leaving the EU, and defence and security being separate from Brexit, we've got to take it in context that the Labour Party stated in their manifesto they were going to seek a pact with the EU in defence and security.
Yeah.
But what that actually equates to is being in European Defence and Security Union, because the EU are offering nobody in Europe anything other than Defence Union. That's it. So
I mean, that's Macron's big thing, isn't it?
Well, it's Macron, Merkel, all of the council.
I think he likes a uniform.
Yes, Ursula von der Leyen's big-ticket item, while she's run down the national defence, the same as we have here in the UK. It's been a common theme across, including France. We've had numerous officers here speaking out about it, numerous officers in France speaking out about it. Very quiet in Germany, though. But what's going on here with this is really... She's over there, and as I said, I'm going to submit this as a question. She was over there to discuss what was going to be done with the money in European Defence Union. It's been spun here politically as a pact.
You think that's what it is? Well, I wonder what you think that impact would be on, say, dealing with an issue like Syria. And where are you on that? Should we get involved? Should we not get involved?
Well, as a nation, there wouldn't really be any possibility of that. They're just not militarily capable. It would only be done through an American-led whatever.
Well, no, I don't mean military. We're not going to go invade Syria. God, I hope we're not. But in terms of what role we should attempt to play, if any.
Fine, then that's a question for Jonathan Powell, the new National Security Advisor, and the National Security Council. So you're into Pat McFadden. So the one thing that's come out from Pat McFadden on this...
He's the Cabinet Office Minister, yeah.
Yeah, he's also National Security Council, is they're talking about reclassification of the designation for the new Syrian leader going from a prescribed terrorist to not, and they want to do it quite quickly. So I'd be quite concerned about what's going on there and why the urgency.
I think the key thing about that is, and I couldn't understand this morning because everyone was obsessed with taking away the prescribed terrorist organisation, this HTS. It's because we're basically not allowed to talk to them if they're a terrorist organisation. So just for practicalities.
Well, there was a repeating pattern of behaviour because they did that with the Taliban in Afghanistan. That was the same.
And that worked out so well. Yes, you're not very hopeful. Right. Thank you for that. We've covered a range of things then. Thank you for that, David. Let me get some of the text messages. We'll go to another call on housing. Mike says Islamic fundamentalists take over. What's to fear? Unless you're not Muslim, of course, or even worse, if you're a Muslim woman. They're pretty bad to the Islamic... The people who have the most to fear from Islamist fundamentalists, the radicals, including this new Abu Mohammed al-Jabalani guy, are other Muslims, I'm afraid. That's the reality. Mick says, surely this regime couldn't have happened without support from certain Western powers, but was that wise? I bet whatever happens in Syria, like Libya, the Western press won't be reporting much. To be fair, the Western press has reported a lot about what's happened in Syria and in Libya. Paul says, considering the West has backed ISIS, I'm not too hopeful and fear for the safety of Christians in the area. Well, this isn't an ISIS group. This is they were linked with Al Qaeda, and the general view was Al Qaeda were marginally better than ISIS. Although, I mean, what a choice! Andy says, "This is how much faith I have in this government to deal with foreign affairs." David Lammy was asked to name 2 famous Syrians, and all he could come up. This is terrible, Andy. David Lammy was asked to name 2 famous Syrians, and all he could come up with was Sir Ian Botham and Sir Ian McCallum. Andy's here all week, by the way, everyone. And Alan says, regarding Syria and other states and countries with endemic political strife fueled by religion, corruption and resources, the last thing they or we need is interference from Starmer and his clowns, let alone the useless woke UN. Well, there you are. Just before we go to a break, we're going to talk to Mason Gifford. Let's take another quick call from John. He's in Newcastle. And John, you wanted to talk about NIMBYs and building houses. What do you want to say?
This nonsense of house building. Where I live in Newcastle, we could drive in any direction and see new houses being built all over the place.
Yeah.
And furthermore, the number of council houses that have been demolished over the last 10 years is unbelievable.
But you're saying there isn't a problem in terms of getting new homes built in where you are in Newcastle?
Not at all. Every direction.
Well, that's good to hear. But are they homes that people want to live in?
Of course it is. see what the problem is.
Well, the problem.
Our area anyway.
Well, John, I'm ever so sorry, John. It's a very bad line. Well, persevere just for a second, but I think the main thing is that there's a lot of problem with getting houses built in the southeast and other sort of busy sort of areas, and we're sort of more in demand. But it's good news to hear that it's in Newcastle. But just want to clarify: are they the homes people live in, or are they high-rise blocks, or are they homes that are unaffordable?
No, they're proper homes. There's no high-rise blocks being built here for years.
Good. I wish that was the way around my way.
Just briefly on the health service, what do Germany do, who've taken more immigrants than we have? How do they manage their health service?
Well, actually, it's only very recently. I mean, I think it used to be only about 3%. I remember looking into this a few years ago. Only about 3% of German healthcare workers were from abroad because they bothered to train up their own people. Mind-blowing. I don't think that many of their arrivals they've had since 2015 have, funnily enough, been brain surgeons.
No.
Funny that, eh? John, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, they're all rocket scientists instead. We know that. That's all of the migrants coming from... We know that, don't we? Anyway, John, thank you very much for your call. 12:34 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk to a former British volunteer fighting in Syria. What does he make of what's happened in the last couple of weeks there? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:37 is the time. Claire Pearcell is still with us. Well, you and I have been talking all morning about what's going on in Syria and this incredibly quick fall from grace for Assad. He's fled to Moscow. Well, you know, good luck. Brutal, murderous dictators hanging around together in Moscow. As long as his wife, who's British-born, doesn't want to come back here, that's fine by me. But a lot of people commentating, a lot of people wondering what's going to happen next. Of course, I don't know about you. I've not been to Syria. I'm guessing you haven't either.
No, I haven't.
We thought we'd talk to somebody who'd been on the ground and actually been there and knows what is actually going on the ground. Let's talk to Mesa Gifford. He's a former British volunteer fighter in Syria. He's also author of Fighting Evil, the ordinary man who went to war against ISIS. Good afternoon to you, Mesa.
afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us. We were talking to you only very recently about what's going on in Ukraine, but you were the first person I thought of, I wanted to talk to you today, being on the ground. Now, tell us, first of all, a little bit about these rebels, this rebel leader, Abu Mohammed al-Jawlani of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group, HTS. We've heard so much about. 1 minute they are, Islamist, lunatic jihadists. And the next minute we're told, oh, well, they've turned the corner and now it's going to be very different and we're hoping we're going to have the UN help them build a democracy. I have a funny feeling that's a lot of wishful thinking. Who are they? Who is he? And what do you think we can expect?
Well, HTS basically is a rebrand from al-Nusra. I think in recent years, Jawlani has tried to distance himself from his extremist past, bearing in mind this is a man that many years ago was fighting against sort of British and American troops in Iraq as part of the Islamic State of Iraq. That was a precursor organisation to the Islamic State. Although I have to say, as I think you mentioned earlier to a previous caller, that in Syria he joined al-Nusra and he was very much associated with al-Qaeda. So he's not associated with the Islamic State. There was actually some conflict a while ago when the Islamic State tried to incorporate al-Nusra into their organisation and they broke away.
Can I stop you here? This is all a little bit People's Front of Judea and Judea People's Front, isn't it? Because an awful lot of different organisations, more or less, all awful, all more or less awful. I think the general view seems to be al-Qaeda were the worst and then Islamic State came along and they were even worse. This guy was allied more with al-Qaeda but broke his links with al-Qaeda. But he's still a jihadist, right?
Yeah, well, does a leopard change its spots? In recent weeks, he's been talking about the diversity of Syria and his hopes for the future. This is very much him trying to, or realising that he cannot rule Syria without Western buy-in, essentially. Yeah. And the big concern is that the extremists within his organisation, despite this sudden transformation in his own personality, would not allow him to get away with this rebrand anyway.
Yeah.
But I think what really matters now is what discussions the whole of Syria have after the fall of Assad. There's a power vacuum now that needs to be filled. And I actually do think it's the right thing to do for the British government to perhaps take HTS off the anti-terror list for a while, to give them the benefit of the doubt and to seek some sort of peaceful settlements, because there are realities obviously on the ground.
Yeah. Again, if we were able to talk to them, I think a lot of people are wondering, what's it got to do with us? Well, we have a funny feeling we know what happens if we don't get involved, because we end up with 7 million Syrians fleeing and we end up with gas and chemical attacks on Syrian people, on the women and children. Apparently everyone cares desperately about in Gaza, but not when they're in Syria. But the thing about that, it's all very well us trying to work with this, but there's already talk from the likes of, Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner, others, of sort of working with the UN, to hopefully, set up a democratic state. Is there any likelihood, any hope, any realistic chance that we're going to see some vibrant, benign, secular democracy running Syria? Because we've seen what's happened in the Arab Spring over so many countries in North Africa and the Middle East, that actually often you go from a brutal, murderous dictator to a brutal, murderous jihadist state.
Well, that's the risk. We've got to hope for the better, obviously plan for the worst. In regards to Syria and what potential Syria might look like, one hopes that perhaps a federated Syria is possible. Syria is, after all, a very multi-ethnic, very diverse country. And if you look at the realities on the ground, the FSA, the Free Syrian Army, which is the HTS is one little fraction of, is very fractured. It's almost controlled by almost separate warlords in different areas of the country. Now, there are other groups, Assad's people, the Alawites, broadly next to the coast, will have to reorganize. The Syrian Kurds in the northeast, allies of Britain and America, also are preparing themselves. But you would hope that all these groups now, after Assad's out of the equation, could come to the table and formulate some sort of plan for Syria that is federated, that represents the different communities. It doesn't have to be a pure egalitarian, wonderful Western democracy, but if it's a peaceful society and one at ease with itself, then that's a win, I think.
Well, indeed. What were you making of so many people, apparently Syrians, queuing up at the border to return to Syria? I have to say, in that scenario, I'd be wanting to perhaps give it a few months to see how things were turning out. But also the attempts to free people from the prison camps. We've seen the prisons, particularly this one outside Damascus, where we've just seen, women, toddlers even, presumably born in captivity. So many people have been held captive for years and years. Some of them just pro-freedom activists. Some will have been other political prisoners as well. But there's still some talk about how one prison has got 7 floors below ground of torture cells. We've seen, 500,000 people, imprisoned, murdered, the executions on a grand scale, the torture on a grand scale. But apparently they can't even get into some of these prison cells because they're locked underground, and they don't even know that all the prison officers have fled and aren't going to turn up anytime soon to help these people. How gruesome and brutal a regime was the regime run by Assad?
Assad and his father, it's the gangster state of Syria has existed for a very long time. They have butchered their own people. At the end of the day, they were not representative at all of the wider community. That's why the civil war broke out in 2011. They basically have butchered their people. Something like 400,000, 500,000 people have died over the last few years. Everyone's seen the gas attacks and everything else. And a while ago, I was actually criticized for this. When I was going around Syria, you would see entire communities not only devastated by the fighting, but completely depopulated because of the mass migration that carried on over those years. I do hope that people in Syria, Syrians in Europe, will return to their homelands, because usually the people who could afford to leave were the middle classes, were their educated ones, and we really want to see Syria rebuild itself now. And that's going to involve coming up with a plan for Syria, something that is hopefully, as I said, federated, something that actually represents communities, encourage people back, and allow Syrians to work out within a security framework something that will work for them and rebuild their country.
Well, again, let's hope so. But of course, often we see, and it's happened in Libya, and it's happened in Iraq and elsewhere, that often when you see these horrible murderous dictators fall, they were kind of the last wall against, frankly, some of the madness. And lots of people say, well, at least we'd rather have order of some sort, some predictability, rather than the chaos we're certainly seeing in Libya and Iraq now.
That's our fault, though. I have to say, just to quickly interject. Well, I think we've got a fundamental problem in the UK, Europe and America with weak leadership. What we need is decisiveness. We had a leader in Britain way back in 2014 when the Yazidis were surrounded on Sinjar Mountain, a decisive leader that would have gone in, destroyed the Islamic State militants that surrounded that community, rescued those thousands of people, then we would have seen many more lives saved and broken lives, at least.
But this was all post-Iraq, post-Afghanistan. This all, let's not get involved, and of course we don't get involved, and things have a funny habit of turning out bad anyway. Let me just read you a post from John Simpson, very senior figure at the BBC, highly respected correspondent. He tweeted yesterday, Bashar al-Assad has done many evil things, but he's weak rather than wicked. His family members, Iran and especially Russia, told him what to do, and he feebly did it. In person, I found him meek and anxious to please, the reverse of the traditional dictator. I'm led to believe he was nice to his mum and made a lovely Victoria sponge as well. What do you make of that, I think, frankly, extraordinary claim?
Well, it's Assad was never supposed to take over. His older brother, I believe, died in a car accident. He is, by definition, if you look at him, the sort of chinless wonder, the meek and mild man. He certainly looks like that. And maybe he has been corrupted by his evil family and circumstance. He was pushed to lead his country by his family, by the way, not by the people, and he's had to then do the terrible things that he's done. Now, that doesn't excuse him from those terrible deeds, and he has killed, as we said before, hundreds of thousands of people.
No one pushes you to torture hundreds of thousands of people and gas children. No one makes you do that.
No, absolutely. It's he absolutely is 100% responsible for his crimes against humanity. His sponsors in Russia and Iran also share some of the guilt as well. And I just hope that with him gone, at least there is a chance. It may be a small chance, but I think there's something there. And with decisive leadership in the West, supporting the people on the ground that we know actually want a better future for Syria and will support our interests, we need to make sure we support them and get behind them.
We shall just, I think, keep everything crossed right now. Maisie Gifford, thank you so much for joining us. A former British volunteer fighter in Syria and author of Fighting Evil, the ordinary man who went to war against ISIS. Claire Pearce, I just want your reaction to what he had to say. Also, a statement that's just come out from the Prime Minister's official spokesman, PM, of course, in the Middle East on a trip somewhere else. He's always in the wrong place, isn't he, the Prime Minister? But he's always on a plane, either way. He says, asked whether the UK government was engaged in conversations with HTS, this Islamist group, through other nations. The PM's official spokesman said, we're having many conversations with regional allies. I'm not going to get into details, but our focus in all of those conversations is on ensuring a political, peaceful solution and stability in Syria and the wider region. I mean, any hope for that?
No, and it was very similar to the words I heard spouted by the Prime Minister last night. It doesn't fill you with hope. It's not very dynamic. It says nothing.
No, it really doesn't say anything like, we all want peace. I mean, apart from Islamic State, what they want is a caliphate. Yeah. Now, this guy in charge, he's now, we think in charge now. Yeah. He's not Islamic State, but he is a jihadist, as we've heard from previous.
He's got a bad history. He was radicalised by the 9/11 attack.
But now all of a sudden he's going to be absolutely lovely, and we're going to have,
fair, caring,
proportional
sharing
representation. That's just not what happens in these countries.
No, it really isn't, and I think people need to wake up to that fact. There are too many people thinking that this is all going to be a bed of roses.
Listen,
it really isn't.
If there's one person who can help sort this out, two people indeed who can help sort this out, it's Keir Starmer and David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary. I have absolutely every confidence that these are the two men who absolutely are going to know their stuff and really be able to deal with these Islamist fundamentalists. I think we all agree on that, surely.
I think they would love that statement on a poster. Julia says,
100%
wins them all the elections
my faith,
ever.
Mr Lammy, all my faith. God help everybody. 12:49 is the time. Let's take a quick break. Up next, we are going to be talking why Castrap Council is unlawfully using low-traffic neighbourhoods and all those bollards just to rake in the fines. What a surprise. And yes, waiting 3 weeks for your bins to be collected. That's up next. We'll talk to the Taxpayers Alliance about why this is all happening. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
The loony lefty walkie-talkie nasal night world tour goes on. Whilst he's out there, he's making business in the UK more unattractive than it's ever been. We've seen business confidence in this country through the floor.
Yeah.
You can't get businesses from across the globe to invest here because he's killing them. Those NICS contributions that he's pushed up are driving businesses out of business. We've seen it. People won't invest here. Every Labour government in history leaves office with unemployment higher than when they arrive in office.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:54 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearsall still with me. A couple of moments. Ian Collins will tell us what's happening on his show. First up, though, let's talk to Syrian Lee, who's a researcher at the Taxpayers Alliance. Talk about, oh, what a surprise, motorists being used as a cash cow again. Good afternoon to you, Syrian.
Good afternoon, Julia. Happy to be on.
Thanks for joining us. Well, we've actually had basically a report that says really very quite clearly now that a London council has unlawfully used low traffic neighbourhoods, LTNs, to balance the books with fines. This is what has been claimed in legal papers in the High Court. The claim is that Croydon Council, a huge council in South London, has created 6 different LTNs as a revenue-raising exercise. No environmental benefits whatsoever, and nothing that actually helps the traffic because it all just moves on to surrounding roads. But basically, they've done it because they want to catch motorists out and fine them. It's what we always knew was true, isn't it?
You're absolutely right there, Julia. This is just another get-rich-quick scheme by councils that seem intent on squeezing every last penny out of taxpayers' pockets. What this LTN scheme means is that ordinary residents who just want to go about their business, they want to get to work, they want to go to schools, they want to drop their kids off at school, they want to go to the shops, they're going to have to take lengthy detours, or else they would have to face fines of up to £130.
Yeah.
And this just hits motorists hardest. Motorists who already face the highest fuel duty in Europe. And research by the Taxpayers Alliance has actually found that just 15 of these councils, through these these LTNs, have actually fined residents more than nearly £100 million. That's how much they've taken from residents.
Oh, wow. And again, there was no demand for them. A lot of them started during lockdown. People go, what? Why are you building this massive, big wooden monstrosity, covering it in flowers and then pretending you're doing it for my benefit? Also, you and I know as well, and this is actually also a problem, I think, on most local high streets, but when you can park and when you can't park, and these routes, they're often incredibly complicated with the signage. So they know that people will make mistakes and they go through and they think they can and they're not allowed to, and they make the money that way. And it's just basically done to just, frankly, it just irritates motorists and local people. And it does affect local people the most. You don't want these things in the first place. But you say raising money. And yet when they do raise the money, they don't do anything useful with it, which is the thing that really bothers people, because all this morning we've been talking about the bin collections and this possibility of this has snuck through about a week ago in Parliament, just kind of Labour casually dropping this plan from the Tories, too late in the day from them, to require councils to empty our black bins, the ones with all the smelly stuff in, every fortnight at least. It should be every week, but it's every fortnight at least. And we're just going to go the way of Wales, where most councils there now, under Labour government for many years, only collect black bins every 3 weeks. I mean, at this rate, we're just going to be a whole big bunch of wheelie bins with a little house attached, aren't we?
You're absolutely right, Julia. I mean, collecting bins is one of the basic public services that governments are expected to provide. And to see garbage piling up on streets is just a sure sign of failure in local government. In fact, research from the Taxpayers Alliance has shown that some councils are forcing their residents to sort their garbage into 10 different types of recycling. That's just one of the ridiculous things that councils are requiring residents to do. And if you fail to do that, just like with those LTNs, they will fine you. They will fine you up to £100, I believe. And it's just a great thing that you point out. Croydon Council Croydon Council especially, is actually one of the worst performing councils in Britain.
What a surprise! And that's always the case, isn't it? It's always the ones that are just bloody useless you end up doing this to us. And again, they rake the money in, they don't spend it on the things we want, but I'm sure Croydon... I can't do it now. I was catching. I'm sure they've got a load of lovely rainbow-painted zebra crossings to keep everyone happy. Shimi and Lee, researcher at the Taxpayers Alliance, we're going to both put our teeth back in. Claire Pistol, you and I have been going on about this. So you were a local councillor for years.
Yeah, I was. We didn't have any of these low-traffic neighbourhoods, but the motorist being used as a cash cow.
But also,
colour me
people have to
surprised.
do you know, if you want to live in a low-traffic neighbourhood, do you know what you should do? Move to the countryside. It's like the people in the countryside who moan about, there isn't a bus every 5 minutes. No, because you live in the middle of nowhere.
I'm quite happy with my car as well.
Quite
happy
your
with
horse
it.
that you keep falling off.
Once.
Okay,
once.
Just saying. Broken pelvis. Don't
I'm not
blame
that
me.
bad.
Don't blame me. Anyway, joining us right now, I don't know what you've fallen off, but God knows what.
I love
Ian
that,
Collins is here.
There's not a shop for miles around. So you live up a mountain, mate. That's probably why.
Ta-da!
You need a cable car to do your weekly bits.
I expect there to be traffic. I live in central London. I expect there to be traffic. Get over yourselves.
It's in the